Hello and welcome back everyone, we Weeb Online, and today I'm gonna start a new series, What If Naruto Was a Cyber Ninja Part 1. If you enjoy this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Shin, all I could think of, was a bright day with great cities that were formerly known as the Hidden Villages but are now called the Great Nation Cities. The five most notable were the Fire, Earth, Wind, Water, and Lightning nations. They were more powerful and technologically advanced than the others, but they were not that far behind and certainly weren't nearly as big as them. Our story starts in Konohagakure, also known as the Leaf City because, although it isn't as surrounded as it once was, it is still surrounded by dense forests that could kill the loudest person you can imagine, likely Guy. Because so many animals fled for their lives during a training session. However, we will be traveling directly to the most significant structure, which is situated in front of the Hokage monuments. On the monuments, a man with spiky blonde hair gazed at the former heads of this city. Although he was dressed professionally, his short-sleeved long white coat was the only item that set him apart. A voice called out from behind his desk, "Lord Hokage." The Hokage sighed at his secretary as the voice said, "The former Hokage Sarutobi wishes to talk with you." "I'm fine, how are you today?" When an elderly man in robes entered and grinned at the younger man, he said, "Thank you, you can send him in." "Hello Hiruzen, how can I help you today?" he asked. He sat down at his desk and waited. Sarutobi started, "Well Minato, I was wondering if you could. I find that name easier to pronounce than his first name." Minato laughed as he leaned back in his chair and got a dejected glance from Sarutobi. "I'm not naming my son after you." "Shame," he said solemnly, but then he began to laugh. "I'm here to make small talk since I know I wanted someone to talk with shortly after I became Hokage." The elderly gentleman replied. Minato stated in a disinterested tone, "It's been 2 years. He made his former boss laugh a lot when he said, "But I know what you mean. I think this is why Jiraiya suggested me for this job." Sarutobi says, "Yeah, that sounds like him." But then his expression changes to one of seriousness. "I hear that you've approved the need to increase our weapons and technology. You of all shinobi should know that improving them will lead to more pain and suffering. The number of ninja that wish to become the best with training and skills is decreasing rapidly. Soon the need for ninja won't be needed anymore." Sarutobi continued. "I know. But I'm being pressured by both sides to improve our capabilities. I didn't wish for it, but now they're doing tests that would harm more people than good, so I had to act." Minato replied to the elderly gentleman. "I held out as long as I could, but I doubt the need of ninja will ever go. Remember the Third Shinobi War? Many died because of it, but many more was saved because of technology today." The former Hokage remarked solemnly, "I know that. I lived through all 3 of them already. I just keep thinking on the old traditions where the nations showed their power by skill, then who has the biggest gun. Well, right now the Earth and Lightning nations have the biggest guns. Water Nation has remained quiet for too long, so we can't be sure what they have, while the Wind is only holding its edge because of the strong rich metals they have in their nation and a little skill," Minato stated to Sarutobi. Sarutobi grinned and expressed his hope that other nations would follow suit. "Yes, and I'm glad that you managed to ally with them. We're showing that not everything has to come down to war." From his desk, his secretary said, "Lord Hokage, your appointment to Captain Fugaku of the Konoha Military Police Force is coming up." The former Hokage nodded when Minato said, "Thank you, I'm sorry Hiruzen, but I've got to go now." After a brief moment of concentration, Minato disappeared using his Flying Thunder God technique, leaving the former Hokage wishing he had known that jutsu. On top of a crowded roof, Minato emerged to inspect a number of the new DRD, Defense Robotics drones. These were big, human-shaped devices with gray armor coverings and white lights on their faces to represent their eyes. Since its feet aren't made for flying, they had 3 toes, 2 on the front and 1 on the back, so it could easily climb up or down a building. Its hands had 3 claw-like fingers and a curved thumb, and its arms and shoulders were covered in extra thick armor so it could easily defend itself in the event that its opponent had strong weapons. Minato was aware that its arms could partially change to be used for close to mid-range attacks. They were strong enough to defeat a typical Chunin and, if there were enough of them, a typical Junin as well. After coughing as he approached one of the individuals, Minato turned around to see that the Hokage had finally arrived. "Sorry Lord Hokage, we were just admiration the newest of defense technology. Much better than the AS, attack sphere," the individual replied. Because the ASs were the size of a black beach ball and could move both on the ground and in the air while drawing a small minigun, the Hokage laughed and said, "And much cheaper." He wasn't sure why they were so expensive. Minato said, "Would you mind taking me to your captain?" The man exclaimed, "Yes sir," and hurried over to the roof door. After a few minutes of walking, the man and the Hokage arrived outside the captain's office. Minato approaches the desk outside the captain's door and says, "Thank you." The man behind the desk said, "Name," without raising his eyes from his computer. The man looked up in surprise as Minato responded, "Minato Namikaze." "I'm sorry Lord Hokage, I didn't know," he said. Minato laughed and walked into the room, oblivious to Fafnir's glare as he hurried back to his computer. "Don't worry about it Fafnir, I'll just let myself in." When the Hokage entered, he noticed that Fugaku was dressed in the police uniform, which consists of dark blue medium armor covering his entire body except for his head. It resembles medium Titan armor, but it is blue. Minato assumed he had to look the part for the ceremony even though he knew it could retract into smaller armor to appear as nothing more than a metal backpack, shin guards, and a neck guard. At the moment, Fugaku was on the phone. Fugaku looked at Minato and said, "Yes. Yes. I'll try and be home early. I've got to go now and I love you too." He then pressed the earpiece to end the call. Minato nodded when Fugaku said, "I assume you're here to congratulate all those that passed the military police force exam." Sighing, Fugaku left the room with Minato in tow, saying, "I'm sorry about all this, but it's policy and I just want to get some rest." The man behind the desk nodded when he said, "Hold all my calls Fafnir." Minato laughed and said, "Hard day I take it," but then she ran into a help drone and apologized. The HD apologized to the Hokage and went back to work. Although many protesters would refer to the HD as robotic slave labor, the Hokage would have to accept that on some level because many treated them as such. The HD was created to help make people's lives easier, almost like a servant. The HD's bodies were oddly shaped, resembling the skeleton of a typical human or someone who has been malnourished for years, but they were colored to blend in with the rest of the population. Minato, who occasionally felt that Fugaku was being robo-abusive, sighed as he said, "Why apologize? That thing should have noticed it was in your way and moved." And to your original question, yes, we just found out that a creature attack happened on the outskirts of the Fire Nation, and when officers got there, let's just say they're not sure if the bones they found belonged to the owner of the house they found it in. He breathed a sigh of relief as he walked. The Hokage nodded when he said, "And then we got reports of another assassination attempt on a scientist by the rebel group for human rights or some nonsense." Well, I can understand why they're angry. The implants improve the human capability to its maximum potential, but that causes the person to require medical trips every 6 months to ensure they're safe and healthy, Minato said as they crested the hill. Fugaku laughed and opened a door to the left, entering a large hall where a number of people stood wearing lighter uniforms than Fugaku's and another man standing in front of them wearing heavier armor than the others. And let's not forget the people that try and rob places because they think they're invincible with the enhancements. At ease men. The Hokage is here to congratulate you all for passing. Following a few minutes of the Hokage congratulating everyone on passing their tests, they had finally reached the final person, who was younger than the others and perplexed the Hokage due to the significant age difference. "And you are?" Minato inquired with curiosity. "Alex Ruler, sir," Minato is told by the officer who goes by Alex. With a laugh, Minato turned to face Fugaku and the non-newbie officer behind him. Minato inquired, "So how did this person do in his test?" The man was told to speak by Fugaku, Sergeant Keys. The two appeared extremely impressed when Keys told them, "He scored highest of the group. And most of the previous ones, sir. He even did better than you." "I take it you're proud about this?" Minato questioned the officer. Minato raised an eyebrow in response to Alex's statement, "No sir, I believe I could have done better." Minato laughed and extended his hand to Alex, who accepted it a little uncomfortably. "We could have used him at the academy." After they shook hands, Minato grinned and said, "Work hard and I'm sure you'll go far. I'm sure they'll need you here." She then released her grip and walked in front of the group. Before disappearing and leaving the new officers stunned, Minato says, "And now, you're one of the most important people in this city. The people need you to be there to stop any and all trouble that will always be there. I wish you the best." Fugaku says, "Show off," and walks away as Keys assigns the men to their stations. The Hokage returned to his office and sighed as he saw the stack of paperwork. He wondered why they hadn't simply placed it on the computer, but he also recalled the time he lost the work he had done and almost destroyed the office as a result. He sat down and started going through them, letting out another sigh. In order to observe the prospective students transform into genin, Minato teleported to his apartment, which was adjacent to the academy building and the Hokage tower, at night. As he yawned and turned to look around, he smelled something divine. He followed the scent and entered the kitchen, where his pregnant wife was cooking. Walking up and peering over her shoulder, Minato said, "Hello beautiful, what have you got cooking?" Kushina grinned and gave him a quick peck on the lips, saying, "It's a surprise." "How was your day?" inquired Kushina. "Boring. Saw some guy in the Konoha military police force that could go far. More boring stuff." "Did I mention boring?" Minato laughed. Kushina laughed. He appeared somewhat excited when she said, "I think so. Oh, and I found out that the baby should be here soon." Kushina, who dislikes having to bring up the nine-tailed fox inside of her, explains, "It turns out that my pregnancy will be a month longer than usual because of my tenant." Kushina grinned and said, "So that means Naruto will be here in less than a month." Minato sighed and gained a perplexed-looking Kushina. "That's a good yet bad thing." Minato grinned and kissed Kushina on the forehead, causing her to blush and give him a hug. "I really love the pregnant you, but I really want to meet Naruto now." Minato nodded as she informed him, "The third has instructed us to meet him tomorrow when we have the time." Minato released Kushina when the doorbell rang and made his way straight from the kitchen to the door. When he opened it, he saw a young girl in her teens with long, straight white hair and bangs covering her left eye while her right eye was light blue. Her small, developing breasts were covered by a kimono that stopped at her hips. She also had black shorts that ended an inch above her knee, black ninja sandals, and white waves at the bottom of the kimono's sleeves. The girl inquired, "Is Kushina-sensei in Minato?" Minato began, "Yes, Itsuko," but Itsuko interrupted. The girl grinned as she entered and said, "Great." She asked Minato nonchalantly, "Have you slowed down or something because I was waiting out here for ages?" Minato sighed in response. As the girl walked down the hall, Minato noticed that Kushina was grinning while working on the stove in the kitchen. She waved and grinned, "Hello Kushina-sensei." Kushina was shocked to see her student when she turned to look around. Kushina said in a startled tone, "Hello Itsuko. You're back from your mission early." With a hint of guilt in his voice, Itsuko said, "Yeah. I managed it. But I accidentally hurt one of my teammates, but Kakashi stopped me." As she approached and gave her a hug in return, Kushina remarked, "Don't worry, I know you didn't intend to do it." Looking down, Kushina saw Itsuko's head between her breasts. "Wow, it's like hugging a futon with two large cushions," Itsuko said. Itsuko was swiftly placed in a headlock by Kushina. Kushina screamed angrily, "What's that about hugging a futon?" As Kushina choked her student to death, Minato sighed, "Let go of her Kushina, you know how she acts and that she can't help it. And Itsuko, you know that Kushina is hormonal." "I am not hormonal," exclaimed Kushina. Minato chuckled, "Sure." Minato smelled burning and said, "I think dinner is burning." Itsuko gasps as Kushina releases her to check on the food. "Can't breathe." As she caught her breath, Itsuko said, "Sorry for saying that, sensei." Kushina gave the pot a quick stir and smiled sweetly, saying, "It's all right." Itsuko rubs her throat and says, "I better get going." Itsuko nodded and hurried off, but Minato grinned and said, "Yeah, I'm sure you can find yourself out. Cute kid. I'm still surprised she became a Junin the same time as Kakashi while being a year younger," said Minato. "Jealous?" Kushina asked with a charming smile, and her act made people laugh. Minato smirked and sat down at the table, saying, "No, my student can take you easily." This is the same conversation in which the third and his wife Bawako instructed them to have the birth outside of the city and to keep it a secret. In less than a month, Kushina was being led out of the city by Bawako, the third's wife, and a DRD that was nearby but appeared to be on patrol. Kushina glanced around, praying that she wouldn't cause any harm to the city, but then she heard her name being called. When she turned to look around, she was pleasantly surprised to see Makoto, her best friend, approaching her holding a bundle. Makoto said, "Hey Kushina, where are you heading off to?" Kushina, aware that her birth had to be kept a secret for the village's safety, said, "I've got an appointment." "Ah, shame. Wow, you've gotten big, haven't you?" Makoto said, observing Kushina's protuberant belly. Makoto said, "You should be due now, right?" Kushina laughed and said, "Yeah." Kushina grinned as she gazed at the black-haired infant in her arms and asked, "So how's your son? Wow, he's gotten bigger, hasn't he?" "Yeah, I can't wait to see how adorable your son will be," Makoto responds. Kushina asked, "Yeah. Can I ask a question?" And her friend gave her a questioning glance as she walked forward. She nervously asked, "Does it hurt?" and got a lot of laughter from her friend. As Makoto wished her well, Bawako told her, "We have to go now, Kushina." and began dragging her away. A few DRD and 6 guards were stationed near the entrance to an underground base that had not been occupied since the last Shinobi War, a long way from Konohagakure. In addition to the Hokage's armor, which is specially designed for the Hokage and their fighting abilities, the guards wore the most superior black battle armor provided to Anbu. However, there are instances when other armor is so much better than theirs that it is necessary to have sufficient skills outside of it. This allows them to rely on the armor too much and upgrade it if they so choose. A voice from the underground base said, "Oh Kami, it hurts." Kushina's voice followed. One of the ANBUs by the door questioned the one across from it, "Isn't the base supposed to be soundproof?" The other said, "Yeah, but then again it is Kushina." The Anbu laughed, but then he noticed something. "We've got comp." The Anbu started, but it disappeared as fast as it had appeared, which unnerved him. He asked the others over the radio, did anyone else catch that on their sensor? The Anbu next to him said, "Yeah." 3 other people agreed, but one person said nothing. "Shit. We may have an enemy on the loose here, so keep your guard up," he shouted. When the Anbu gave the order and received 3 yeses, he saw that Boar took 2 DRD and went to the location where the sensor detected it. "Boar, take the 2 closest DRD and examine the area. Cat, stay near the front and Rat can guard the rear." The Anbu had a bad feeling and tried to make sure nothing would get through, so the other DRD started to circle the area. 2 DRD were close to the female Anbu as she stood in the center of the lake at the front. Their sensor briefly became active once more before becoming quiet again. They were perplexed and unsure of what was happening because something else appeared on his sensor and then disappeared a moment later. As the second Anbu put it, "What the hell is going on?" Boar's voice could be heard on the radio, "Holy shit." The first Anbu, aware that something negative had occurred, asked, "What is it?" Boar says to his radio as it began to receive interference and went silent for a short while, "We've got a man down in a DRD. Destroyed. I'm not sure what hell happened here. Hold on, never mind, it's just other DRD in this section. It's still active but it got damage." Boar shouted over the radio, "Fuck. It's B. Erdwith. So. T appeared nowhere. But something unidentified was interfering." The signal died, and the 3 Anbu near the front entrance appeared shocked that their man might have been killed while 3 DRD were present. "Aiju. Through him. Ed back." The first Anbu shouted over the radio, "Rat. Get you ass back here and bring the 2 DRD with you. Boar may be trouble." Then, out of nowhere, the Anbu known as Rat fell from above in front of them, leaving them stunned as they saw his blood-stained and damaged armor. "They attacked me," was Rat's final statement before he passed away. As soon as they looked up, they saw 2 DRD covered in blood and slowly descending towards them, both of them slightly damaged. "Fuck. I think they took our men by surprise and killed them before they could defend themselves," the second Anbu exclaimed. "Captain." Cat called, causing them to glance quickly in the direction of a man in reddish-black armor and a black cloak, as well as 3 bloody and slightly damaged DRD, leaving the forest. The man laughed and drew out a spike, saying, "I hope this isn't the best the Leaf has to offer. These machines can be easily manipulated if you know what and where to put stuff." Before charging at the 2 DRD above him, the captain yelled, "Cat, I don't think the 2 with you have been turned. Quickly try and eliminate the corrupt DRD before it's too late." He then produced a black handgun that could pierce armor, but it would take several good shots to kill a DRD because it was made to withstand those kinds of bullets. With haste, he pointed the gun at the DRD and fired. As the corrupted DRD charged at the lone Anbu and the 2 DRD, the man in the cloak laughed and said, "So our fun begins." Kushina had just given birth inside the underground base, and she gazed down at the plump blonde infant in Bawako's arms. She grinned and said, "Hello. Naruto, I finally get to meet you." She wished she could hug him forever. Bawako recalled the first time she saw her firstborn child as she grinned down at the new mother. Bawako asked the first HD who was closest to her, "U0035, can you get clean sheets?" The HD accepted the job and started to walk towards the door, with Bawako following closely behind to clean the infant. While the second HD was helping with the birth, Taji was making sure everything was alright. Taji grinned and shook her head when the HD asked, "Do you require assistance?" As Minato worked diligently to fix the seal that held the 9-tailed fox, the room's only door exploded, destroying the first HD and engulfing Bawako in the blast. Minato and Kushina shouted, "Naruto," as Taji called out Bawako's name. As 2 blood-covered, damaged DRD entered, A voice from the smoke said, "Fear not, your child is alive and well." For the moment, the smoke cleared to reveal a man in a black cloak, holding his battle-armored hand over Naruto's head. How on earth did this individual manage to breach the defenses? Taji was concerned because Kushina's seal was deteriorating and the fourth Hokage's son might be killed at any moment, so Minato pondered. The man laughed as a gun emerged from his sleeve and was aimed at the infant. "Step away from the Jinchuriki, otherwise. Well, I'm sure you can work that out." With a trembling voice, Minato exclaimed, "Jay, just calm down," as Taji retreated, the HD trailing behind. The two DRD stared at Minato as he said, "You really live up to the name, Yellow Flash, to outrun a bullet. I hope you haven't forgotten one of a ninja's skill with paper." Minato noticed that there were paper bombs on the blanket that Naruto was in. "You should take your own advice," the man said, tossing Naruto into the air before pointing the gun at the bundle and pulling the trigger. "Dude!" Minato shouted before disappearing, causing Kushina to scream their names as Taji charged at the man, her battle armor covering her medical attire, and prepared to attack the man in the cloak. "You won't do any better than your comrades outside," he laughed. As he watched the bathhouse to his summer house explode, Minato, who had just managed to escape the explosion with Naruto, fell hard to the ground and gasped, trying to stop Naruto from crying. That was too close. A HD emerged from his summer home as the door opened. "Master Minato, what's happened?" the HD inquired. "I have no time to elaborate, I must rescue Kushina." Minato yelled and rushed inside the house to place Naruto in their bed. "UO453. Take care of Naruto until I return," Minato yelled and quickly activated his battle armor. Yellow and black metal started to cover his body and limbs, and it had the leaf symbol on the left side of his chest and the word Hokage written on the back. His armor was much thinner than most other light armor-based armor, but that was to make sure his speed wasn't affected. His helmet soon quickly covered his jaw and left his face visible as the face cover closed, so he could see all signals in his armor to show if anything is wrong or damaged, and luckily nothing was by the explosion. "I've got to go." "Fuck. No messages." Minato cursed as he tried to find one frequency to warn the Leaf City. He gave up as he tried to find Kushina and realized he was having difficulty due to his seal being part of the actual seal, which was slowly breaking away. "Where the fuck are you, Kushina?" Minato shouted. The cloaked man stood in front of a huge pond with 4 large stones encircling a small one where Kushina stood. It was in a dark corner of the woods, a place where even wild animals avoid because of its unusual energy. "Come forth, fox with 9 tails. Now then. That's a strange way to find out a sex of an animal. Never mind, let's see how technology does against the 9-tailed fox." The man gave the order, and the fox gradually erupted from Kushina until it stood and roared into the night sky. Kushina then lay on the stone while the fox roared as it stood on its hind legs. "Stop!" Kushina shouted as she tried to cling on to life as long as she could, feeling more than worn out. "You Uzumakis are quite formidable when it comes to dying. Surviving childbirth and then having at least 100-foot fox being ripped out of you," the man said, turning around with a look of surprise. "In any case, I'm sure the 9-tailed fox wants to give you something for keeping it locked up for so long." The man laughed as the fox smashed the ground with its fist after smashing its old container. Then it looked up to see Kushina in the arms of a man hovering over the trees. "Kushina, are you okay?" Minato inquired with a hint of optimism. "Yeah. Where is Naruto? Is he okay?" Weakly, Kushina inquired. "Yes, but I believe we should get you somewhere safe first for the time being." As he swiftly flies around the Kyuubi's claws, which swing around to crush him, Minato yells. "That should hopefully do it." The cloaked man laughed as Minato hurriedly started to fly high into the sky to make sure they were out of its reach. Minato was startled when the Kyuubi opened its mouth to wipe them away with a tail beast ball. "Dude!" Minato shouted as the fox charged forward, moving startlingly fast in their direction. The cloaked man says, "I wonder if that did it. Probably not. Time for the leaf, I think." After a few seconds, the ball is just a tiny ball in the sky. Minato carried Kushina to the bed where the HD was keeping watch over the infant and put her beside him. "Lady Kushina, you require medical attention," the HD said. "Just take care of the two of them." Before disappearing, Minato screamed and triggered a weapon system that caused a yellow stake to materialize in his hand. "I've got to save the village." As she clutched her infant, Kushina muttered, "Good luck, Minato. Can't we just do rock, paper, scissors this time?" A curtained silver-haired shinobi stood near the Hokage tower with 2 other shinobi. Inside the unexpected city of the Leaf, people were behaving normally as they had every other day, and the shinobi were either off duty or helping to keep the streets calm. Kakashi questioned a green man beside him. "No, I hope the strength of youth will prove that I am superior to you," Guy shouted. "Don't you guys always manage to have a good time? I'm probably more youthful than you guys since I'm younger," added Itsuko with a charming smile as a white-haired girl giggled next to them. "She's got a point, Guy." Kakashi laughed, but then he experienced an odd sensation. "Does anyone experience an odd feeling?" Kakashi inquired. "No. It couldn't be." Sarutobi thought as he went through the paperwork while Minato was away and felt a dark force that seemed all too familiar. A man in a black cloak descended from the sky and landed on one of the tallest buildings. He rubbed his hands together and looked in all directions, almost as if he was looking for something. "Now let's see how this world does while compared to the rest of them," the man said, spotting another man in a black cloak near the bottom, which was almost impossible to see from the height the man was standing because the building was almost a mile high. "Bingo," he says as he sits down and observes. "This city is going to have so many casualties." After a few minutes, the nine-tailed fox suddenly erupted, destroying 2 tower blocks and killing every person inside. "What the fuck is going on?" As they and several dozen others started to flee, someone yelled as some of the fugitives were hit by falling building debris. Within seconds, a few shinobi, DRD, and police officers arrived on the scene, and they were taken aback by what they saw. "It's the nine-tailed fox," someone shouted. They were intended to eliminate the threat, but the DRD swiftly launched themselves in the direction of the fox in an attempt to at least buy time, but they were unsuccessful. "Officers of Konoha Military Force. The civilians around here need to be evacuated and taken to safety. And activate all defense robot units," shouted a top Anbu wearing white battle armor over the radio built into his helmet. "We need every bit of assistance we can get," he shouted. "Yes, sir." As the fox destroyed more buildings with people still inside and wiped out the DRD as if it were nothing, they all started screaming and didn't want to be close to it at all. The evacuation alarm could be heard everywhere. Every civilian, get out of the buildings. Get out of Sector 7 right away, and the rest of the Leaf City is evacuated." Over the alarm, the announcer shouted. "Hokage III, the nine-tailed fox is attacking the city." Suddenly it was there. As he emerged atop the Hokage building, an Anbu shouted. The third Hokage said, "I know." His battle armor was already covering his body. It was silver and black, and it resembled samurai armor in style, but it was thinner and fit him better. The only thing that made it different from samurai armor was the jetpack that was fastened to its back. His hands were fully covered, and he had spikes on his knees, shoulders, and knuckles. What happened out there? Did Minato fail to keep the seal closed? He asked himself. Have all ninja of this generation fled the city? We cannot allow them to perish before passing the torch and teaching the next generation. The elderly Hokage gave an order. Yes, sir. The Anbu shouted and followed instructions. I've got to hurry. Minato was about to teleport when he felt a presence behind him. He spun around to attack the assailant and saw it was the man in the black cloak. Minato appeared on top of the Hokage monument, stood on his head, and gazed in shock at the devastation engulfing his city. He held the stake in his hand, and as he swiftly dropped the yellow stake, he caught Minato's arm and let it fall to the ground. Got you, the man said, and he started to draw Minato into a different dimension, but Minato disappeared, leaving the man looking shocked. Talk about fast, I'll have to take him as soon as my hands are on him. The man says, as he hears the stake hit the ground, suddenly glowed, and exploded. The man in the cloak emerged from a rift after Minato landed hard against the ground in the middle of the forest. That was close. The man laughed. You nearly had me with that explosive stake. Minato coughed as he got up and started to wonder what that was. After the main attack failed, Minato cursed because he believed it would have at least slightly hurt him. He started to wonder who the person was and how he was able to get past all the Anbu and the best defense shield available at the time. He also bought a protection barrier just to be safe. He started to narrow down the list of potential suspects until he found one. Are you Madara Uchiha? Did he ask? Sure. Why not? The man said, pulling down his hood to reveal a helmet with a face guard that was almost like a mask, with patterns covering the face guard so that no one could see his face. As he raised his arm, a large blade appeared. It was a towering great sword that was entirely black with a red edge on one side, while the other side was straight and at least the size of the man. Minato could tell the blade was made to either crush or slice through whatever it struck, and he knew that his battle armor wouldn't withstand even one blow from that. When Minato noticed that the mask required 2 hands and that holding it up caused some slight strain, he remarked, "Looks like that weighs a lot. I can't be hit, so what are you going to do?" "Yes, it might slow me down." As he smashed it against the ground, making it shake from the force, the man asked. In an attempt to come up with a quick solution before the fox destroys the city, Minato twisted his hands slightly and 2 yellow stakes materialized in his hands. "Okay then, let's make it personal," Minato says. The masked man swung the giant sword and Minato charged at blinding speed, ducked under the blade, and launched the stake towards his face, but he went straight through him while the masked man spun around to try to slice him in two. The masked man immediately spotted a flash near his feet and an explosion occurred, obstructing the Hokage's view. He hit something hard and heard metal scraping as a result, and he grinned beneath the mask. His sensors could detect the smoke and saw that Minato was several feet away, slicing a shadow clone in half. "You really are fast, Minato." "That's nothing," Minato said, and he charged at a startling pace in the direction of the masked man once more. The masked man swung his sword again, but Minato dodged it this time. Knowing that this would happen, the masked man released his blade and spun around rapidly, slamming his knee into Minato's face and smashing the face guard as he fell to the ground. Minato felt someone grab him, a little confused by what had happened, and when he opened his eyes, he saw the masked man dragging him into a different dimension and sucked completely in. The masked man got up, wondering why something didn't fit, and said, "That was too easy," before the ground exploded open and Minato smashed a Rasengan into his chest, not realizing that Minato had marked him and being launched into the air. As he watched the masked man fall toward the ground and land hard on his feet, experiencing severe pain and witnessing a portion of his left arm fall off, Minato thought, "That did some damage." He started to say, "This isn't good," but before he could finish, Minato had already driven the yellow stake into his stomach. "Damn it," before the stake exploded, he shouted and saw that Minato had sealed him to take away the fox's control. "We've driven it from our city." The fox roared as it felt liberated from the masked man's control and launched itself out through the city wall. It then roared again in rage after discovering numerous wounds all over its body. "Continue pushing it away to prevent further harm," Sarutobi shouted. Yes, Hokage III. Some members of the military police force chose to stay and fight, while many of the ninja yelled. Ignoring the tiny hole in his battle armor beneath the bleeding cloak, the masked man leapt out of the smoke from the explosion and landed on a tree. "You really deserve the title of Hokage. To wound me twice and breaking my hold on the fox," he said. Before disappearing into a rift, he says, "But know that it will be mine again, no matter what." As he hurried away to deal with the 9-tailed fox, Minato thought, "I don't think he's lying. This isn't good," Minato thought, and he activated his jet boots, flying at blinding speed towards the battle that raged on. He stood on top of his head once more to try to get the best view he could. He was immediately shocked by the damage of the city, with at least a third of the city destroyed and a large section of the city wall gone. He could hear the fox and the fighters of the leaf fighting in the distance, the fox roaring and sounding extremely angry. The young Kurenai argued with her father about joining the battle while the younger ninja force stayed there for the majority of the Kyuubi attack, protected by a few older ninja who were miles away. Etsuko presses her hand against the shield and says, "I've got a bad feeling about this." "Well, some of us young people can fight with ease," Guy shouted. Kakashi looks behind him and notices newly assigned genin, a boy and a girl who appear to be around 7 and 8 years old. "I know what you mean. But there are people younger than us here. We're able to battle." The younger, girly one punched the older, boy one in the back of the head after the boy yelled. The girl made the others look curious that she was this serious at her age by saying, "Shut up, Akira, it's the 9-tailed fox, we'd be lucky to even see it before dying." Ryukiya was hurt by that, Akira screamed in agony. Concerned about his parents, Asuma says, "We can't really have them running around." The third collapsed in exhaustion as the 9-tailed fox opened its mouth and formed a tailed beast ball, causing most of the survivors to panic. Power reserves are down to 15%, his battle armor told him, and he cursed because he knew his chakra was also down by that amount. "I can't possibly deflect that blast again," Sarutobi shouted while wielding his enormous staff weapon, which had been transformed into the Monkey King and severely damaged after causing the fox's head to turn away from the city. The fox roared, forced its jaw down, and sent the yellow object smashing into the ground. "It's the fourth." A flash of yellow was seen, and the fox's head was sent upwards as a yellow object was under its chin, trying to make it miss as much of the city as possible. The tailed beast ball was launched, shattering a few skyscraper roofs and heading straight into space. As they recognized the armor, one of the Anbu shouted. As a giant toad fell from the sky and crashed on top of the nine-tailed fox's back, the fox slammed its paw down right over Minato's location. Several people yelled his name. Damn! Now that I'm on the damn nine-tailed fox. I was just taking a nap. Gamabunta shouted, startled. Just keep it in place. I have a lot of power to use. As he landed on the fox, Minato screamed and began channeling all of his energy into his ultimate jutsu. All right. Just hurry up. Gamabunta shouted and did his best to restrain the fox. Minato. How did this occur? To the Hokage, Sarutobi shouted. The fox lifted its paw and was about to crush the third Hokage with it as it flew to crush him before Minato could explain, and he was almost done with his jutsu. Third. The nearest Anbu screamed and seized the elderly man to discard him. He and the nine-tailed fox disappeared when Minato completed his jutsu just in time. Where did they go? Among the Junin, one shouted. Confused that the sensors were malfunctioning, the Hokage became anxious and turned on his sensors in an attempt to locate them. Where is he? As he attempted to fix it, the third pondered. Now what do we do? An Anbu captain inquires, seeking guidance as she was unsure of what to do. Try to assist everyone who is hurt, and try to save as many as you can. Sarutobi ordered and an explosion was seen miles away. Damn it, squads 4 and 6. So that we can help Minato, follow me, he gave the order. Yes, Hokage the third, they shouted, turned on their boots and jetpacks, and took off for the explosion. As the nine-tailed fox stood where their vacation house was, Minato skidded across the ground while clinging to his wife and son. I feel sorry for our helper. Minato says in a tired voice, need to put up a barrier. My chakra is almost drained, Kushina says weakly, looking exhausted and deathly pale. As Minato succeeded in erecting the barrier, chakra chains sprang from her back and wrapped around the giant fox. As Minato worried about Kushina, Naruto began to cry and Kushina appeared distressed. Kushina, are you okay? Minato shouted. I'm fine. My love, I'm so sorry. Naruto, I didn't mean to wake you. Kushina grinned as the chakra chains around the fox grew tighter. I'll drag the fox into me and kill it. After expressing concern, Minato gave her one chance to see Naruto again and explained the plan and the Reaper Death Seal. A minute later, as Kushina held the fox tightly, Minato started to go over the hand signals, and the third and Anbu appeared close to the barrier to observe their actions. Damn it, Minato. Don't. As they attempted to breach the barrier, Sarutobi shouted. Minato felt extremely weak and had only a small amount of chakra and power left in his armor after pulling out half of it and creating a large hole in it. This is hard. Minato breathes heavily. While Minato finished Naruto's ceiling bed and received the Kyuubi's chakra, Kushina loses focus and the chains loosen. The Kyuubi saw this and launched his claw to kill the baby, but Minato flashed in front of the fox's claw, quickly grabbed it, and used all of his remaining power to hold it back as Kushina's strength continued to decline. Minato. Naruto. Kushina whispers as she lies on the ground. Some things never change. Minato screamed as he pushed the Reaper's arm out to seize the fox's remaining chakra, intending to send it to Naruto, but he sensed a significant disruption in the barrier. He looked up as the Reaper started to drag the remaining spirit, and a black cloaked figure crashed into the ground, looking around with mild interest and sighing. Minato disregarded him because he sensed that his battle armor's power was rapidly ebbing away. He cursed and hurried to tear the last of its soul from its body, yanking it out of his body as the claw pierced the Hokage, coughing up a lot of blood and realizing that his time was running out. Minato staggered away as he bled uncontrollably. He fell to the ground and used whatever strength he had in his arms to drag himself to Kushina, leaving behind a large trail of blood. The Kyuubi drew out its claw and staggered around in horror and anger as it lost its strength and collapsed, dissolving as life from its eyes left its eyes. The man in the cloak approached the dying Hokage and remarked, "Poor man. But I'm surprised you're still alive." Minato managed to get a few feet away from Kushina, who was lying close to Naruto. He collapsed on the ground, his eyes full of love and concern. "I love you." Minato smiles, his eyes no longer full of life. With her eyes closed, Kushina utters the feeble words, "I love you too, Minato, Naruto." The cloaked figure laughed and approached the deceased Hokage, saying, "Poor couple. Avoid getting near them." Sarutobi shouted as he attempted to break through the barrier, wondering how the person managed to do so because he could sense it was waning. "It's not possible, my good man," the cloaked man said. "I've got something playing with this man." He approached Minato and grabbed him by the edge of the hole in him like a handle, disregarding the blood, muscle, and pieces of bone. The jetpacks on his feet then activated, flew upward, and shot straight through the barrier that dropped a few seconds later. The two Anbu squads hurried in, and the former Hokage hurried in with them, checking for traps. "Squad 6. You protect the space. I'm with Squad 4. Squad 4's 4 Anbu members swiftly followed the third's lead into the sky, while the final squad swiftly secured the area. The third gave the order, activated his jetpack, and launched himself towards the man who flew straight into the now cloudy sky. "These leaf ninja sure don't give up," the cloaked individual said as he entered the cloud, followed by the ANBUs in the third, who were unable to use their sensors on the target and had to follow by sight. The man was moving at full speed towards the clouds. "Hokage. We could become overly intoxicated, and you know what happens when that happens," an Anbu member shouted at Sarutobi. "For him, it's the same, not wanting to allow his friend's body to be taken," Sarutobi screamed. When they emerged from the clouds and attempted to track down the person who had stolen Minato's body, a cloak fell and struck one of the Anbu, covering him and causing him to soar out of control because he was unable to escape. "What the?" an additional person shouted. The Anbu was falling toward the ground when the Hokage turned to look around. "I found the..." one of the Anbu cried, but then there was a scraping sound of metal, followed shortly after by a painful scream. The Anbu and a man wearing what appeared to be black battle armor were visible. The majority of the armor was missing, exposing a pale, bony-looking body beneath what was left of it. He had thin black armor covering most of his ribs and shoulders, which was meant to resemble ribs and shoulder bones, along with matching gloves. His legs and feet were also thin black armor that appeared to be shaped like large bones. And his helmet was shaped like a black skull with red protective glass as eye sockets. Then they saw that a big blade-like object had just been used to stab the Anbu through the torso. This shocked them greatly because the Anbu battle armor was among the strongest, and the man had cut through it in a single motion. The blade was taken out of the Anbu and left him to fall to the ground, knowing that he would not survive. "Sparrow." After screaming, a female Anbu went to try to save him. "Relax." She paused and stared at the last Anbu, who was wearing white battle armor to indicate that he was an Anbu captain, before turning to face the murderer who was still holding Minato's body and a big, round-handled blade. She heard him laugh as he moved the handle, and the blade flew away as a long pole emerged from it, transforming it into an odd-looking scythe. "We'll leave you alone if you return Minato to me," Sarutobi screamed angrily. They were shocked when the person said, "I can't do that," and shot higher into the air. Sarutobi followed, and they did so for a few seconds before the other Anbu began to panic because they were getting too high. Lord Sarutobi. All three of their battle armors abruptly shut down as they saw the person they were pursuing continue to ascend higher into orbit, and the Anbu captain yelled as they saw bluish lights in the night sky and reached the peak before reaching orbit. "What? How come he's still working? Come on, restart, restart," Sarutobi shouted to himself as he attempted to reactivate his battle armor while the other Anbu did the same. As the three began to descend, they gained speed and heat as they fell toward the ground at nerve-wracking speed. Sarutobi's armor came back online, and he hurriedly acted, using his jetpack to reduce his speed but hitting the ground hard and skidding across the ground while damaging his armor. The ground was drawing closer and closer, and they were all in a panic, praying to Kami or any god who was listening to help them. The heat they were receiving from the air friction was becoming worse and nearly intolerable. The final Anbu failed to reactivate the boots and struck the ground like a tiny meteor, killing her on impact and causing a slight tremor. The Anbu captain only succeeded in reactivating his jetpack boots, but he struck the ground more forcefully than the Sarutobi, causing significant damage to both him and the armor. After a few minutes, Sarutobi, who was worn out from just surviving almost becoming a meteor, wonders where the Kyuubi's body was. "Lord Hokage." Startled by his state, one of the Anbu shouted, "What happened?" He aided him and inquired. Sarutobi limped over to the rapidly decaying Kyuubi and said, "We lost him." He didn't really want to say anything more because he began to believe that he was the reason his squad died. "Hokage, Lord." Sarutobi sighed when he saw that he was once again the Hokage after someone had called. "Kushina is barely alive." Sarutobi stared in disbelief as the Anbu screamed. "Now, try your hardest to keep her alive," Sarutobi ordered as he tried to get a signal, succeeding in getting a weak signal that was getting stronger. "Looks like we've got communication again," he says to himself. Come in. The Hokage is this. We urgently require medical transportation. The city is to the northwest of us. Bring it right away, he shouted. We read you. We'll try and send one as fast as we can since there are still people in need of them, but rest assured that we'll send it. Someone else responds. Thank you. Sarutobi says as he hobbles over to Kushina, who was being attended to by the Anbu to ensure her survival. He then sees Naruto lying on a nearby bed and, with a slight smile, he hobbles over to the infant, sits down beside him, and picks him up as he cries. Hey there Naruto. I'm Hiruzen Sarutobi. I'll be the next thing to family you'll have. And I hope your mother will be alright. The hospital was so overcrowded in the days following the attack that nearby structures had to be transformed into temporary medical facilities. The third Hokage wandered around the main hospital, making sure everyone was okay. He might have been grinning at them to give them a leader who was encouraging. However, he sighed and wished that Kami or any other god would grant them a safe journey to the afterlife because he was deeply grieving the loss of everyone and his wife Bawako. A red-haired woman on life support was lying on the bed when Sarutobi entered the final room of the day, which had 2 police officers waiting outside. Although he appeared dejected, he was relieved that Kushina was still alive and hoped she would recover. Someone called out to him, Lord Hokage. He turned to face the doctor present. Yes, said Sarutobi. The doctor approached him with a confused expression. The Hokage nodded sorrowfully as the doctor told him, we've gotten her vitals up and everything seems to be working. But she doesn't seem to be regaining consciousness. We're not sure if she'll ever improve beyond that. But in a few weeks she may not need the life support anymore, after that it doesn't seem to get any better. With a sigh, the Hokage squeezed the bridge of his nose. What are her chances of recovering all by herself? He inquired. Well, by my calculation, she'll have a 35% chance of coming around in 15 years, and that's with her recovery rate, and that's the maximum percentage. The physician said with a sorrowful voice. It's an astonishing that she's still alive since every Jinchuriki from past experience has died after removing their tailed beast. With a dejected tone, the Hokage approaches Kushina and takes her hand, squeezing it. Well, we can hope that she'll recover sooner, she's a fighter. Before he leaves, he tells himself, I'll try my best to raise your son, but I'm not sure how he would live if you don't wake up soon. As rumors that Naruto was a Jinchuriki spread like wildfire, Sarutobi walked to the baby until he arrived at the hospital to check on him. When he opened the door, he saw the officer assigned to guard Naruto. Sarutobi approached them with a slight smile after noticing that the officer was seated next to Naruto's crib, his hand close to the infant as Naruto attempted to grab for them. Sarutobi pauses close to the crib and remarks, he seems to like you, Officer Ruler. Baby Naruto is still attempting to reach his fingers. With a laugh, Alex lets Naruto grab his fingers and responds, yeah well. I've always been good with kids. Cute kid. Why am I guarding him anyway? Not that I mind, he replies. Sarutobi sighed as he examined Naruto, saying, I'm sorry, but that's now classified information as of yesterday. He asks, any trouble? Alex sounds a little alarmed by this and responds, yeah, 3 since my sift started. I don't know why anyone would want to harm a baby. I knocked them out and my mates took them away. The Hokage hands out his hand and says, good, thank you for doing that. Someone should be replacing you shortly. Alex looked down and held out his other hand because Naruto was using it, and the Hokage shook and laughed. Alex nods and smiles as he says, I hope to talk to you sometime soon then. A black space station orbited the planet Shin, high above it, and was nearly invisible to anyone looking into space. A man was hovering in the center of the control room, which had a large window facing the planet. The gravity was off, and there were several dozen computers below him, along with a few people wearing white lab coats. The man who was hovering had a black cloak that floated in all directions. He was extremely pale, had no hair on his head, and his hood was down. He had the face of a young adult, but his eyes were a strange yellow and seemed to contain too much wisdom for someone his age. He coughed a little and kept watching the planet. A small child floated in when the wall behind him opened up to reveal a door. The man turned slightly to see the child and turned in the direction of the child. He asked the child, what's the report? The child, who appeared to be around 6 years old and had the body and facial characteristics of both a boy and a girl, said in an emotionless voice, they're still doing stuff on him. It was difficult to determine whether the child was a girl or a boy. The youngster, who had short brown hair and emotionless green eyes, floated in the direction of the man before catching the edge of a computer and gazing out the window. The things are start forming now and 2 more people died by failed tests. The kid responds. The man says, shame, and begins to float in the direction of the door. The man exits the room after saying, "I'll be seeing on how they're doing. You can do whatever." The child looks at the scientists who made an effort to avoid eye contact and says, "Very well, master." One of the scientists whispers to the person sitting next to him, "I hate that kid." "Well," the other scientist says glumly, "we'll be dead sooner or later." The scientist observes the child spinning a knife in the non-gravity room after the child responds, "That's correct. It may be sooner than later." The scientist repeatedly said, "Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit." He avoided making eye contact while staring at the computer. The man entered through a door that might have passed for a wall while he was moving down a corridor in the ship's gravity area. It appeared to be an operating room. Behind them was a tank with a person inside, and he saw two individuals, a man and a woman, dressed in white robes and covered in blood. The man inquired, "So how's our newcomer doing?" Looking through the glass tank, the bloody man remarks, "Not good at all." The man in the black cloak questioned, "Why's that?" The bloody woman puts the bloody gloves in a bin and remarks, "Well, he's dead for a start. And let's not forget the most important thing." The man in the cloak said, "And that is?" The man points to the blonde man with the big hole in the glass tank and says, "He's got a hole big enough to fit a person through his chest. I'm not kidding either." The man said, "Well, can you do anything?" The woman tells him, "Well, we can't bring him back to life if that's what you want." In a somber tone, the man tells them, "Give me a straight answer or one of you is going out the airlock." "Sorry, master, but we sure can do some stuff to him. What little there is of him," the man responds. The woman looks at a jar with a toe in it and says, "Actually, we're glad that you've given us this much compared to your last sample." She says, "Much more helpful." Before leaving the room, the man in the cloak says, "Well, I'm glad you're glad. This time, make sure nobody dies." "Master, this isn't bioengineering." The man recalls exterminating a fifth of the ship's crew the last time they attempted to do so. "Or at least I hope not," he says. A few months later, we're in a country that is home to one of the most unusual hidden cities. The Mist City was surrounded by a weird mist that never seemed to thin out. It was smaller than other cities on the surface, but the majority of its buildings were on or under the water, which made it even more unique to those who knew about it. A rare occurrence because the mist was almost as silent as a grave. A beggar's body was bleeding slightly around his neck, but the amount of blood they could detect in the water was too small for him to have bled to death here. 3 mist ninja, dressed in dark blue battle armor that had a slightly fish-like appearance, stood near the water on a boat. "Any ideas?" Sounding like a woman in her early adulthood, one of the mist ninja asked, looking around at the numerous pillars that kept the city's top out of the water. She knew that it was similar underwater, but much safer because the Mizukage made sure that they were constructed as sturdy as their ships and submarines. The youngest one, who sounded about the same age but also very dark, said, "Well, May. It's either a murderer that moved the body to hide the evidence, one of the body harvesters that were in need of blood, or the possibility of vampires." He was carrying a giant sword larger than himself on his back. The final mist ninja, who sounds like he was in his very late 20s and is dressed in Anbu, light-based armor, and has the best tech and stealth. Like most mist ninja, he has a fish-like appearance, says, but the signs do lead to that. He also puts his hand in the water. The mist hasn't found a vampire in nearly 3 years. Zabuza. After jumping into the water and maintaining her balance with chakra in her feet, May says, "Yeah, that means another vampire has entered our village, or we missed one." She drags the body out of the water and places him in the boat, feeling sick when she sees his neck torn open. Zabuza put his hand on the handle of the enormous sword he carried on his back and laughed, saying, "That looks interesting." May, who has never liked being close to the water without the safety of the walls, says, "I've got a bad feeling all of a sudden." We're getting closer as bubbles start to emerge from the water around the boat they're in. "We've got company." With a shout, Zabuza drew his enormous sword and swiftly sliced through a creature that had leapt out of the water and was ready to board the boat. They were a major problem in the Water Nation and only posed a threat if you were near water without any protection. They were known as the hybrids, and they were mutated humans who had either been genetically altered or suffered from radiation exposure in the water. They could take many different forms and shapes, but they were primarily human-shaped with sporadic animal and fish-like appearances. They were more violent and stronger than a typical ninja. Zabuza swiftly swung his sword in a 360-degree rotation as several more hybrids leapt out of the water and attacked the 3. The other 2 mist ninja ducked as Zabuza sliced 2 hybrids in half. "Kill them all." With a shout, he spun around and slammed a hybrid car in the face, sending it flying. "Of course, Zabuza." As May shouted, she made a few quick hand signals and inhaled deeply. A hybrid leapt out of the water, and she exhaled, creating a tiny hole in her face cover. Lava sprayed from her mouth, covering the hybrid and killing it swiftly and painfully. It fell back into the water, and steam erupted upon contact, making it even more difficult to see than it already is. As they climbed on board to retrieve him, the Mist Anbu swore and whirled the pistols around, holding the barrels while spikes emerged from the bottom of the holders. "You will fall," the Mist Anbu said, drawing 2 pistols and firing at the hybrids with such speed that the creatures were wounded but not killed. As he dodges a hybrid's attack and slams the spikes into its back, he says ominously. As more hybrids jumped onto the boat, Zabuza saw them and swore once more, gripping his blade and swinging around, slicing through as many as he could. Because the hybrids weren't giving up as quickly as usual, the Mist Anbu ducked, and Zabuza pointed his gun carefully and fired, hitting through the head of one. It roared in rage and spun around, trying to rip his head off, but missed as the other gun spikes into its face, causing it to collapse and bleed to death in the water. The Mist Anbu heard crashing noises and was seized by the feet. He turned to see that the hybrids had smashed through the metal boat to capture him, and he was astounded by their newfound strength because the boats had been built to withstand their attacks before. The floor collapsed, and he plunged into the water, and after a few seconds, he came up and attempted to pull himself out, but a hybrid was already waiting for him, with a sword-like arm around his right forearm. The ninja looked up and swore as the hybrid took a swing and cut through his helmet, causing a large gash over his left eye, but it wasn't deep enough to harm his eye. He fell back and landed on the water, only managing to keep his chakra flowing. Tsurugi. Mei screamed as she saw her comrade being attacked, but the man was unable to see through the broken glass, so he hastily stood up and took off his damaged helmet. When the hybrid chuckled and swung its sword arm at him, Tsurugi ducked and charged, swinging and smashing the remnants of his helmet in the hybrid's face. The hybrid roared in pain, but Tsurugi stopped that by wrapping his arm around its neck and snapping it quickly. The man had long black hair, a small beard, and a red scar on his left eye that slowly trickled down his face. He took a deep breath and blew out a concentrated mist from her mouth, hitting the hybrid in the face and making its head feel rapidly. The creature tried to roar in pain, but its mouth melted away as it collapsed and sank into the water, leaving a large amount of blood around Mei. He breathed a little easier, but noticed that the boat was sinking quickly, so he picked up the body and looked to see Zabuza out of the boat already, smashing the back of his sword in the back of a hybrid, shattering it completely. A few sudden bursts of light came from above, and everyone looked up to see 3 helicopters in the air, coming closer to them, the guns on their fronts warming up. The 3 mist ninja cursed and hurried to get rid of any hybrids near them, but the hybrids kept coming and doing a little damage each time, and they were growing more and more irate and tired of this. The sudden burst of bullets drowned out all sound, slicing all hybrids above the water or on the boat into pieces. A minute later, all of the hybrids were either dead or had escaped, and the 3 mist ninjas stood there, surveying the blood-stained water that covered 100 yards as the hybrids roared in rage and dove into the shadowy depths of the water, trying to avoid the spray of bullets. The helicopters were dark blue, with a rotor on the back like a regular helicopter, but with wings and jet-like engines on either side in the middle, missiles at the very end, and a head-like object at the front with 4 blue lights that resembled eyes on the front and a machine gun on the bottom looking like a dragonfly with a large chest. Tsurugi tells the people inside the helicopters, "Good work." It descends close to the water, a door opens, a mist ninja emerges to greet them, they nod, and they quickly make their way to the door and get into the helicopter, which takes off toward the city level. "You're lucky I found you when we did," a mist ninja remarks, donning the Mist Anbu battle armor, which had a V-shaped mirrored eye screen and extra armor around the head, shoulders, and chest. The armor was very dark blue with light blue lines here and there, and the helmet resembles a hammer, and the V-screen makes it appear to be a mouth. "Do you want me to harm you, ow?" Mei grinned gloomily. They felt the helicopter swerve as the Anbu tried to ignore her and turned to face the outside world. "We're nearly there," he said. A mist ninja, who appeared to be in his mid-teens, remarks, "Looks like this guy was drained quickly." He had a huge claw on his right hand, a rebreather mask covering his lower face, and something resembling a horn on his forehead. Zabuza looks at the Tsurugi that was holding his eye and notices that the medical ninja are treating it. "Yeah, we're guessing vampires." Tsurugi responds, "It's a possibility." However, he wonders if there was a vampire present, recalling the last time one caused a lot of deaths in the city and how hard it is to kill them. The helicopter touched down after Ao said, "Well, if that's true, then we've got a problem, but the morticians should determine that." The medical ninja told Tsurugi, "You should be fine, your eye isn't damaged, but you'll have to check with the hospital." They nod when Ao says, "Report to the Mizukage, we'll head on over to the morgue and drop your friend off." As the helicopter took off, the three of them looked into the city, or what little they could see of it because the entire city was shrouded in mist. At this moment, they could only see 300 yards, and noticed that they were just outside the Mizukage's tower, which was closer to the sea and partially submerged. The Mizukage's office was beneath the water's surface inside the tower, and he was talking to a man in a white robe, glasses, and a comb-over. Two ninja, all fully armored to look intimidating, stood behind the Mizukage, one with gray-striped battle armor and a large sword with numerous paper tags on it. The Mizukage sat between them, his eyes pupilless pink and emotionless, and he was older than he appeared. He was wearing a green poncho. "I've been analyzing the child according to your standards. He's still a child even though he would be as intelligent and skilled as you." The Mizukage inquired, "How is he in the terms off-skilled?" The scientist informs the Mizukage, "Well, he managed to make an AI with nothing but a computer and ordinary household products." "When was this?" inquired the Mizukage. "Nearly 3 months ago. We weren't sure if it was just a rumor, but we've been watching him and he's just as skillful as our older scientists. We believe that he could be a prodigy. If I'm right, he could improve our robotics by 50 years at least." He shares the news with Mizukage as he speaks. With a rough voice, the black-armored ninja questioned, "How is this possible?" With a hint of annoyance, the Mizukage tells him, "I was going to ask that Jinan." With a bow and a hammer and axe-like sword attached to his battle armor, Jinan responds, "I'm sorry, Lord Yagura." The scientist uses air quotes on special to say, "Well, he's one of those special cases." Yagura questioned, a little perplexed by the air quotes. "Special. He's very possibly autistic. He barely said a word throughout his life and he's over 7 years old now." Yagura asked, confusing the three people in the room, "How will he do inside the ninja training?" Wondering why the Mizukage would think that, the scientist retorted, "That I don't know, Lord Mizukage. I'd consider having him under my guidance and he'll achieve much more in science than he would as a shinobi." Yagura turned in his seat and looked out at the scenery, or what little there is, and said, "I'd rather have him have some kind of battle experience, to see how a child of a police officer and high-ranking ninja as parents." Before heading out, the scientist bowed and said, "Well, as you wish, Lord Mizukage." Before leaving, the Mizukage asked the scientist, what was the child's name. The scientist examined the papers he was holding, recalling every detail but never being certain of the names of the people. Before departing, he told his leader, Kane Shoko. Jinan asked, "Are you sure that's wise?" Considering that any potential ninja recruit could still be used as a decoy, Jinan wasn't particularly concerned, but he was wondering if they shouldn't try to get the kid to improve his tech as much as possible. Yagura tells him, "This child could be the greatest thing to have come to the Water Nation in many years." The two nod in agreement, but they are still a little perplexed. Yagura abruptly asked his two guards, "Where is Fubuki?" As his eyes snapped to attention and he turned to face them. "I do not know, Lord Yagura. He has been in hiding since the news of Mangetsu's death." Jinan let him know. The other said, "Such a waste of life." He was dressed in gray-striped battle armor, and his helmet was back in the armor, revealing a man in his early 30s with long black hair and a beard that was kept neat with beads. In accordance with custom, he wore a headband, bandages around his head, an eye patch, and dark lips. He licks his shark-like teeth, which he and every other swordsman member have had since birth, and says in a somber tone, he believes that if the leader is dead, our organization will break down again, and I believe him. A Yayuri acting weird lately, so is Kushimaru in fact, and let's not forget Zabuza's former master going missing and only his sword was found. And I hear that our elders are searching for another newborns or children with the swordsman mark. Yagura says, his eyes gradually losing focus, We must stay strong, making sure we grow without the world knowing our power. Jinan asked his comrade, "We understand, Lord Yagura, right Jinpachi?" Knowing that expression has been present since his 3rd year as the Mizukage, Jinpachi gave Yagura a slightly irate look as his eyes lost most of their focus. Keeping in mind that everything changed from excellent to decisions laden with power, earning their country the moniker Blood Mist Nation. Recalling that he was being questioned, he answered. He looked out the window and said, "Yes, of course." Someone knocked on the door. Yagura says, "Enter." Zabuza and Mei enter through the sliding door while carrying the injured Tsurugi. They were examined with interest by the two swordsmen, who wondered why they were damaged and why the oldest Junin was hurt while the other two were not. Jinan inquired, "What happened?" Mei was the first to speak. With a slight shudder at the monstrousness of the creatures, Mei explains, "We were attacked while investigating a body in the water. We were just outside the protection area and were attacked by hybrids, most likely drawn in by the blood, as little as there was. We managed to take the corpse and give it to police, that way they can examine the body for cause of death." Zabuza gives them the news. But the most likely cause would be a vampire draining him dry. When the two experienced swordsmen raised an eyebrow, they turned to face the Mizukage, who simply stared without responding. He inquired, "Are you positive?" Zabuza looked at Tsurugi, who nodded in agreement, and said, "Very." The people who entered the room nodded and proceeded to give Tsurugi to the hospital after he said, "Thank you for informing me, you may all leave as I need to process this." He told his guards, "You too." The two nodded and departed as well, leaving him in the room. He shut the door and remained there, staring at nothing and thinking nothing, as if he were a vessel without contents. A boy was standing outside the door of his house, a distance from the Mizukage's tower, and he wasn't paying attention to anything. He was disassembling a remote control, a taser, and an electric toy hover car. He also had some other items from the apartment, which he scattered around and was assembling. He yawned and completed his creation, tapping it to make it come to life. It was shaped like a snake and began swiftly flying and moving in a snake motion. As the boy watched it move down the hallway, the door to his house opened and a woman in a police uniform emerged, with a hat covering her short black hair and a deactivated battle armor around her waist and back. She sighed as she wondered where she put her taser after noticing the remains of the toy hover car, the remote, and the young boy. The woman continued to watch the snake-like robot as it passed by. As its tail touched the wall and sent a powerful electric shock through it, she jumped. With a sigh, she turned to face the boy. She points to the tiny robot and says, "Kane, I told you not to make things like that." The boy, who had untidy black hair and was dressed in shorts and a hoodie, ignored her and instead fixed his emotionless gray eyes on the tiny robot. As she opened the door and glanced at her quiet 7-year-old son, the woman let out another sigh. As the woman says, "Come on Kane, go inside now, Daddy is inside and he'll play with you." His mother closed the door after the child entered the apartment without responding. She was torn between being pleased that her child had such talent and the fact that he had never spoken in his life. As she started down the hallway to go to work, she checked to make sure the electric snake robot wasn't near her. After a few hours, a tall man in an oversized coat was standing patiently outside a bar, scanning the area from left to right. When someone else rounded the corner and noticed the man, he approached him and nodded, receiving a nod in return. The tall man says, "About time you showed up, Zabuza." Zabuza enters the bar and says, "Sorry, had to do something." The taller man follows him right away. "Wait, Zabuza," the man commanded, forcing the young man to pause and give him a look. He says to him, "I need you to know. I take it that it has something to do with the Mizukage's strange behavior," replied Zabuza. The man looked surprised and raised an eyebrow. The man said, "You're very observant, aren't you?" "Yes," Zabuza said simply, glancing down at his sword and recalling how his sensei had used it in the past. The man sighed when he saw this. Zabuza nodded as he said, "I see, so your sensei informed you." The man entered the bar and said, "All right, then, we're here to talk to potential allies." Zabuza glanced at the bar's sign. "All high and low drunk." He couldn't understand. He follows the man and remarks, "Allies in a place like this? Maybe." Everyone in the bar stared at the two as soon as they walked in, and the majority of them were aliens who had crash-landed in the Water Nation and were seeking safety in the city. Ignoring them, the man moved to the back of the bar, Zabuza trailing behind him as he surveyed the patrons. A few half-breeds, even before tech was created, remained hidden for many generations, but the majority belonged to the alien race. After taking a seat in the far corner, the two waited for a short while before someone approached them. With a strange accent, the person said, "Jinpachi, I take it." When they both looked up, they saw a Turian, though it was too far in the shadows to be seen clearly, but they could make out its outline. Jinpachi motions toward the seat next to them and says, "Yes, please sit." The Turian nodded and took a seat. A bigger individual approached them shortly after. Its voice was deep and booming as it asked, "Jinpachi?" Jinpachi nodded and pointed to the seat in front of them as the three turned to see a big brute standing there, one of the few Krogans in the city. "So, interesting choices of help." Zabuza remarks, glancing at the pair. Jinpachi introduces the mean-looking brute who is taller than her, saying, "This is Gatog, he is the leader of the Krogan group in this city. And this is Nihia, representative of the Turian people." The Turian says, "A pleasure to meet you." Nihia was wearing the partially damaged Blue Sun's armor, and while he appeared to be similar to other Turians, he was darker than the others. Gatog, who was bigger than the typical Krogan and had multiple battle scars on the left side of his face that looked like they were from an explosion, asked, "So what do you want?" He was already growing tired of the meeting. His intimidating appearance was enhanced by the numerous scars on his bulky, dark red armor. The aliens gave Jinpachi a curious look as she stated, "We want to overthrow the Mizukage. We need all the assistance we can get, and if we succeed, we'll give you what you wish for most for you and your people." Inquiring as to why and how they would accomplish this, Nihia said, "I see, what makes you think you can achieve such a feat? We're still planning on this, but we're gaining support slowly, but that means we're gaining it quicker." Jinpachi tells them, "And should we gain the support of your race, and any you can convince to join, we'll be able to control the city more easily." Considering what they could gain for doing this, Gatog remarks, "My men have been itching for a fight. Your leader does provide us some missions, but we're getting bored of them." Jinpachi grinned at this and turned to face the Turian to see how he would react. Jinpachi nods as Nihia states, "That will be a hard decision to make right now, allow me some time to think this over. But might I ask who else is supporting your cause?" The three of them appear a little taken aback when Jinpachi states, "We already have several high-ranking ninja. The Thieves Guild won't inform anyone of our plot. We're currently got 2 small bands of mercenaries that will assist us and several armed civilians." Nihia questioned, "Wait, what about the swordsman of the mist?" Jinpachi made the 2 aliens appear perplexed as she said, "We're the only ones so far. I believe that there may be a traitor among them." "Aren't you the traitors?" Jinpachi says gloomily, "You can say that, but I meant that one of them knows the truth, yet serves him willingly. She is unsure of who it was or whether there are multiple." "You're one of your leader's guards, right? Why not just kill him?" suggests Gatog. Jinpachi says, "Can't, it'll risk too much and it'll just happen again while achieving nothing." The 3 give him a perplexed look. "I can't explain it now, but I will serve as the leader and become the Mizukage should we be successful." With a nod, the 2 alien representatives stood up. Gatog says, "We'll talk about this later, Jinpachi. I'll have to tell my men about your proposal." He then turns to leave. Nihia bows his head to them and says, "And I'll think about what you're offering." He then departs as well. With a sigh, Jinpachi reclined in his chair. "Is that all you've really managed to get for support?" replied Zabuza. With a weary tone, Jinpachi responds, "Yes, I had heard rumors that the Dark Brotherhood was here. I tried to get them to support us." "What did they say?" inquired Zabuza. They were a little taken aback when a voice said, "We said no." They turned to see an Argonian from the table next to them, and they cursed that they had overlooked someone close by. He looks at them and remarks, "But it was an interesting offer to say the least." With a glance at the green Argonian with the little horns around his head, Jinpachi remarks, "Vizera, right? I thought your time here was over." Gazing at the 2 swordsmen, Vizera replies, "Not yet, but very soon. I'm still looking for some younglings." As they depart, Jinpachi watches the Argonian and says, "Okay then, good luck with that." When he got back to Kane's apartment, he was watching the TV and whatever channel it switched to. His father, who sat on the couch behind him and was curious about the location of the remote control, had very short black hair and a big scar that ran up the right side of his head. He was only dressed in jeans. The 3rd shinobi war and other fights had left him with numerous scars all over his body. He sighed and yawned as he watched Kane begin disassembling a toy robot. He knew it was expensive, but he also knew that if they were permitted to sell it, the money would be recouped tenfold. He appeared perplexed when the doorbell rang. They never have company unless it's for an important occasion. Astonished to see that the person on the other side was a swordsman of the mist, he approached the door and opened it. Surprised, he said, "Ayayuri, what are you doing here?" Ayayuri points to a short woman with a cloak that only partially covers her face and remarks, "Not the proper way to greet a superior." He responds, bowing his head slightly, "I'm sorry. What brings you here?" She tells him, "I'm here to discuss your son." The father asked, "Really? What would you like to talk about?" Ayayuri simply handed him a letter without responding, and after a minute of perusing it, he became increasingly displeased. He throws the letter back in the woman's face and slams the door after saying, "You can't expect me to agree with this. He's my son, not a test subject. We have high hopes for him, even if he still hasn't said his first words yet." With a sigh, Ayeri left the building, wishing that things had gone more smoothly, but now they would have to take more drastic measures to get what they wanted. After a few days, it was past midnight, and Kane was still awake. He has never been able to fall asleep in his life because his mind is constantly racing and he needs to do something. He looked at another small robot he was building at the moment, which had an oval-shaped body, 7 very thin legs, and a single bluish eye on top of the legs. With a slight tap, Kane activated it, causing the eye to change into a blue light. It then moved onto its legs and tiny jets emerged from its sides, causing it to hover slightly while it took in its surroundings. It's amazing that this simple robot was constructed from his mother's phone and hair dryer. It flew around and landed on the window, watching the outside world. He left it behind and started to walk in the direction of his computer, which he had transformed into an AI. The only thing he spoke to was Ri. He sat down and watched the screen as Ri, a simple AI, battled to get past the firewall that another AI had put up. Ri was learning faster than the older model. He had been watched for some time, but they didn't know how he made them. To him, however, every link and every robotic model inside his head was flawless. His parents talked about him and his abilities as if he were the next Mizukic, even though they were just an ordinary family and only average in comparison to everyone else. As he sat there, he mentally went over yet another odd and intricate design, wondering how he would manage to pull it off with the resources at his disposal. He was aware that his parents were home, but he had no idea what they were doing. The lights appeared to flicker briefly before going out, leaving his computer as the only source of light because it was powered by multiple sources. His mother hurried into his room after he heard gunshots a few seconds after hearing a faint banging at the door. With a gun in hand, she hurried out the door after telling him, "Kane, we're going someplace safe." She noticed a few flashlights shining down the dim hallway. She then pointed her gun at them while crying, firing and striking them, but only slightly because the two were wearing battle armor. Before a voice spoke up from behind them, he heard the two reload, preparing to shoot her. Someone said, "Don't shoot, you bastards. You'll hit the child," to an elderly man. With a slow retreat, Kane's mother prepared to escape into her bedroom, which featured an escape hatch to the water levels that halted close to her station. She keeps walking backwards while keeping her gun aimed at them, crying a little because the father attempted to stop them when she rescued their son. As they got closer to her bedroom, she was going to push it open, but it opened on its own, leaving the mother perplexed. She was about to turn around and shoot when something grabbed Kane. She was startled to see a small figure in a cloak standing there with 2 odd-looking swords drawn. She watched as Kane was yanked from her arm. She struggled to resist, but a hard, strong object struck her stomach, forcing her to release him. She watched as the son was taken away by an unseen force. When the person behind her raised one of the swords, lightning struck it, piercing her back and piercing her heart as she struggled to catch her breath. After coughing up a lot of blood and rapidly starting to bleed to death, the mother fell to the ground and the sword was taken from her. She muttered softly, "Kane," before dying. The person in the cloak, who sounds like a woman, approaches the floating Kane and puts her swords away before telling the people on the other end of the hallway, "Done, now get what you came for." As the lights go down and a man in a white robe enters Kane's room, the elderly voice says, "Good work, shouldn't take too long." While the woman was walking down the end of the corridor, someone came up to hold Kane and hand the child to the cloaked woman. The person nodded and went into Kane's room. Clad in mist ninja battle armor, she tells the 2 men, "You 2 are with me." The 2 nodded and followed her into the living room, where Kane saw his father lying on the floor with a smoking gun in his hand and multiple bullet holes in his body. They left the apartment and started to walk toward one of the elevators, entering it without Kane's apparent reaction. A few minutes later, they found themselves outside on the roof, where a helicopter was perched. As they started to move toward the side door, one of the mist ninja said, "You've got to love the robotic helicopter, Dragonfly." They went inside, where the woman put Kane on a seat and the 2 ninja he was with sat on either side of him. A few minutes later, the 3rd mist ninja and the elderly man in the white robe entered the Dragonfly. Kane looked at his feet while the 3rd ninja sat across from him. The man in the white robes approached the woman at the front of the helicopter and moved to the closest seat. After starting and taking off, The helicopter left the apartment building where Kane's deceased parents lived and headed into the mist. Even though he doesn't sleep, Kane was thinking that he should be in bed right now as the helicopter continued its journey. He noticed that a portion of the right-hand wall near the front opened. A DRD was standing there but not in use at the moment, and the woman who killed his mother approached it. The DRD shook violently and activated when she pulled out an odd-looking knife and stabbed it in the neck. Its eyes turned red instead of white and it looked around. Kane showed a little interest when the woman said to the DRD, "Hello, Mazukage, I have done what has been asked." However, he quickly lost interest and assumed there would be another DRD on the other side. As he sat there, staring down at his shackled hands out of boredom rather than fear, Kane was already aware that 3 ninjas were standing watch over him. However, the man in the white robes, who was in his mid-40s, stood out from the others. He had long gray hair and a white patch over his left eye. The woman, who was much shorter than the majority of the others, had now taken off her cloak and tossed it to a seat. 2 swords were visible behind her, and she was wearing white striped battle armor with blue accents that fit her body rather well. She wore a plain cloth around her head that was notably tied at both sides, allowing the ends of the cloth to stick upward while the rest of her hair fell down. A DRD that had a strange device stabbed into its neck caught her attention. It glanced at the boy and then back at the woman. The DRD says, "You have done well, Ayayuri," in a dark, robotic voice that sounds as though it was being discussed. As the scientist pulled out a laptop and a small disk from a case, Kane kicked his legs a little because he knew that the disk contained the majority of Re and that they were interested in how he made it. According to the scientist, this should be interesting to see how this kid made an AI. The scientist inserts the disk into the laptop. The woman known as Ayayuri says, "Must be a very simple AI, seeing that a kid made it." The scientist and DRD nod in agreement. The DRD looks at the child and tells him, "Be quick about it, Dr. Lem." "Sure thing, Mazukage." The doctor laughed and began utilizing the laptop to try to figure out the AI's design. A moment later, the laptop began to emit electric sparks, confusing the people in the helicopter. Ayayuri questioned, "What's going on? Did the AI break through the system?" Dr. Lem blurted out, "No. There was enough firewall to protect the laptop for half an hour against an AI." In an attempt to figure out what the chaos was, the laptop began to make odd sounds. The laptop screams, "File corrupted, firewall destroyed, virus spreading throughout system, signal transmission." Dr. Lem shouted at the laptop, "Signal transmission? What signal transmission?" and received tiny electric shocks in response, but he chose to ignore it while attempting to stop it. Dr. Lem's hands were hurt when the laptop exploded, and he swore aloud. Ayayuri screamed at the doctor, "What the hell is going on?" and pointed one of her swords, the kiba, at him. He screamed, startled by what had transpired, "I don't know. Somehow the AI broke through all the firewalls. It tried to escape through the fucking system. But I'm not sure if it got out." With a somewhat irritated tone, the DRD inquired, "Did it get out or not?" Dr. Lem started to say, "I don't know," but the helicopter veered so badly that almost everyone fell over. The DRD remained in place and appeared to go offline for a brief period of time before reconnecting. The DRD tells them, sounding surprised and shocked by how quickly this AI operates, "The AI managed to get into the satellite. It's already been shut off from all signals, but it's managed to burrow its way into a few areas around the city." When he exclaims, "And it's taken over this damn dragonfly and we're heading towards a tower." They hasten to get ready to leave the dragonfly. Ayayuri, another DRD, and the other wall next to it suddenly started to move. Its eyes were glowing pink instead of the usual white. As the DRD looked around, the people inside the dragonfly stared in disbelief. It raised its left hand and pointed at the red-eyed DRD, and then it fired a small cannon. The shot caused a big hole in the wall and blew the red-eyed DRD through the head. After drawing her other blade, Ayayuri assumed a stance. She screamed, "You're going down." And as lightning began to streak down the blades, she rushed in the direction of the DRD and was ready to chop off its head. However, the DRD dodged the blade and charged at Kane and the 3 missed ninja. Kane's companions swiftly drew their pistols and shot the DRD to eliminate it before it was too late, and nobody appeared to disappear. They were able to inflict some damage, but the DRD lifted its right arm, stabbed through one of them with a blade, and then gave the victim a headbutt. With haste, the second missed ninja aimed the weapon at the DRD and fired, damaging its left eye and striking its head. As he ducked quickly as it fired, the DRD pointed the cannon at the mist ninja's head, making him practically shit himself. It left a large hole at the end of the dragonfly and removed its tail. Everyone was struggling to stay upright as the helicopter began to spin uncontrollably. The DRD managed to stand and reached for the trembling mist ninja, but the third mist ninja abruptly returned and used a sword to cut the DRD's arm off. The ninja coughed up blood and fell backwards as the DRD, appearing irritated, took its blade from the dead mist ninja and slashed through it deeply. They were now scraping through the buildings, as evidenced by the smashing sound coming from outside. The DRD turned to face a Yairi, who was still standing there brandishing her swords and appearing to be losing her temper. As she lifted her blades, lightning began to strike the building, damaging the interior and striking the DRD and other occupants. A Yairi appeared in front of the DRD and stabbed it through the chest after it turned around and saw Kane clinging desperately to the seat. After receiving a powerful electric shock that damaged its circuits and wires and caused it to lose motor control, it attempted to quickly turn its one hand into a cannon. It attempted to aim quickly, but its aiming system started to malfunction. The lightning blasted out of the DRD, shocking Kane and causing him to scream in agony as it fired and missed repeatedly. A Yairi stumbled backwards and pulled one of the swords out as the DRD saw this and fired again, successfully blowing a large hole through her. One of the swords remained in the DRD as it started to slowly shut down. It swiftly sped to the escape hatch, smashed the door open, and leapt out of the dragonfly after turning around and grabbing hold of Kane. They both began skidding across the ground and stayed there after the DRD crashed into the ground with great force and unintentionally lost hold of Kane. A few yards away, the dragonfly crashed into the ground and skidded across the floor, approaching the edge and going over, striking the lower levels and setting off a tiny explosion. Kane lets out a painful grunt and notices that his pajamas are almost completely burned off, and he has severe burns all over his body. He also breaks his arm when he moves it. As people began to emerge from the buildings to investigate the noise, he lay there, seeing fragments of the dragonfly, the mostly demolished DRD, and Kane. A person hobbled out of the wreckage, dragging a badly burned person with her, and gushing blood from a huge hole in her stomach. With little else to do, the person grunts in agony. The woman takes a deep breath, lets go of the doctor, and staggers away, saying, "Relax, doctor. We've got to escape." She looks up to see that they have fallen to the lowest level before entering the water. She raised an eyebrow at the person she saw as she looked around in agony after someone landed behind her. She held on to the hole in her stomach and coughed up blood as she said, "Jinpachi, what the hell are you doing here?" Jinpachi questioned, "You know who he is, don't you?" The woman grinned while coughing. Using her remaining sword, she struggled to stay upright while laughing and said, "Yeah, but I won't tell you shit." He pulls out a large sword with a paper bomb attached, says, "Thought so. I just wish the swordsman of the mist remained loyal." He swung and smashed the woman, causing her to explode and scattering pieces of her all over the place. After putting his sword away, Jinpachi hurried over to a nearby car, got inside, and drove off on foot. As Jinpachi started to question who he could now trust, he told himself, "I have to find out who I can trust." As the DRD began to twitch, Kane began to cry and drag himself towards it. As he looked over it, he heard people gasping at the damage they saw. After rapidly pressing a few spots on the DRD, a portion of its head opened. Kane swiftly reached inside, tore out a piece of its brain, and concealed it. The DRD shut down right away, and people hurried over to check the boy out. As they continued to watch him, Kane simply appeared to return to his previous self. Kane clenched the piece in his hand and thought to himself, "I know that was you, Recalling the news that a child had created artificial intelligence, one person questioned, "Isn't that the prodigy child?" As someone else gazed at the sword inside the DRD and wondered what the devil had happened, they said, "And isn't that one of the sword's Kiba?" After many hours, the police discovered his parents dead in the apartment, and Kane, the only found survivor of the crash, was in the hospital after being drugged up. They kept checking on Kane to make sure he wouldn't have any issues anytime soon because they were concerned that he might experience severe trauma as a result. The security camera in the room appeared to be operating flawlessly at the moment, but it abruptly flashed pink and turned to face Kane, strangely observing his. Strange glitches have been noticed in various parts of the city by people, but they haven't given it much attention because they've been seeing stranger things. The most recent odd occurrence was a DRD activating. This was only a few hours away from the morning, when it was supposed to be active. Its pink eyes glowed as it looked around, wondering where it was now and what its surroundings were. When it noticed a telephone box nearby, it went to it, opened the door, put its hand on it, causing wires to fly out, and then pushed its hand inside the phone, beginning to search through it for any information it could find. Before the system attempted to lock it down, it looked around and obtained a small, detailed map of the surrounding area before ripping its hand off the phone and unintentionally destroying it after a few seconds. As the DRD started down the street, it heard fighting coming from the lower levels. Looking down, it saw two 6-year-old children fighting two teenage boys. It scanned them after becoming interested in what it was seeing. Two of the younger ones were genin, and one was the offspring of a 7-ninja swordsman. The child had dark lips, was taller than his age, and appeared to tire easily compared to the other 6-year-old girl. The 6-year-old boy, who had messy brown hair and dark lips, was rough looking for a child and was wearing oversized gray sweat clothes and a large practice sword. Despite her age, the girl next to him would be deemed cute if she didn't have a dark appearance. She had short brown hair and was dressed in training attire. When a hover car dropped close by, the two teenage boys stopped their fighting stance. Jinpachi got out of the car and turned to face the children. Jinpachi commands in a somber tone, "Takumi, come, we're heading home now." The 6-year-old boy gave him a nod, and he started to approach Jinpachi. The young girl kicked one of the older boys in the leg, made him swear, and made him hold his leg while complaining, "Ah, we were having fun." Rina is told by the oldest, who is wearing a headband with an object that resembles a horn, "Don't kick Maizu, Rina." The girl yelled, "Up yours Gozu," and kicked Maizu's other leg, causing him to yell in pain once more. After Takumi got into the car and drove away, Jinpachi sighed at the siblings as they started fighting and shut the door. The DRD cocked its head and resumed its stroll down the street, scanning the area once more as it noticed a few people passing by it with little regard. It scanned the small group of people at the other end of the alleyway it was looking down, but they didn't appear on its system, so it simply moved on as if it had no interest. A man in his late 20s with rough skin and a shaved head asks in a rough voice, "Do you know how hard it is to find you?" He is dressed in light gray, dark battle armor, and his face is visible. Behind him, two burly men with hoods over their faces were dressed in the same battle armor as the shorter one. The three's right arm, however, had a diamond-shaped symbol with a circle in the center that was the most noticeable feature of their armor. They were ignoring a brown-haired girl, perhaps 10 years old, who was dressed in rags and gazed at them fearfully and innocently. With a terrified tone, she said, What do you want? Don't play innocent with me, Babette. I know who you are since Astrid told me. I'm Delvin, I'm sure you know already. The bald man responds. The girl crosses her arms, smirks, and looks more grown up. You're getting slow on finding the people that your organization supposedly owns. The young lady laughed. Delvin rubs the back of his neck and remarks, I must say that it doesn't look like we're going uphill anytime soon. Our guild has been going through a difficult time for years. The girl laughed. As she hands him a small object, the girl says, I know, Astrid wished for you to have this. With a nod, Delvin gave it to one of the big men standing behind him. Oh, and can you not feed on people? It poses a problem to us and we've lost contact with a few of our employers. But we're not sure if they're related, Delvin says to her. As her eyes turned black and a few tiny fangs showed, the girl grinned and said, Sorry about that, but we've got to feed. Babette smiles and disappears into the darkness, saying, We'll be here for a while longer though, we're searching for contracts, fulfilling them and possible recruits. One of the big men questioned, that was a vampire. Delvin says, yes, evil little girl. And he and the two men start to leave. After a week, Kane was sitting in bed with his hands bound to prevent him from doing anything harmful again after already replacing his heart monitor. He glanced at the camera that was still flashing pink, knowing that it was a piece of Re, and he was bored and aware that he was going to be sent to an orphanage. The only thing that made him cry was the data piece at his bedside, which he knew contained a piece of Re. The doctors were gracious enough to let him keep it. He could swear he saw pink in the eyes of the same DRD that circled around every half hour when he sat there and looked out. He looked at his feet once more as boredom irritated him, and yawned once more as he gazed into space, wondering when he could leave this dull place. Jinpachi was waiting outside a hospital room on the opposite side of the hospital when the door opened and a shinobi in uniform entered. He appeared a little worn out and had Takumi follow him. He clenched his teeth as he fought to move, coughed up some blood, and turned to face his father. He appeared to be in excruciating pain and completely worn out. He grips his stomach while wearing bandages over the majority of his body. It hurts. The man beside him removes his bloody gloves and says, "I know, but it's for your own good." The man hands him some cash and says, "It'll toughen you up, now go and get yourself a sweet." With a smile, Takumi hobbled over to the vending machine. Jinpachi inquired, "So did it go better than usual?" The man remarks, "Well, he's stopped crying, so that's good." Jinpachi sounds disgusted when he says, "Yeah, a procedure like that would bring even the Mizukage, a tear in his eyes." The man tells him in an emotionless voice, "Yeah, but let's hope that the plan works. If it doesn't, then your son will suffer from chakra difficulties for the rest of his entire life." Jinpachi says, "He won't, he's more skilled than me," and starts to approach his son. A hover ship, a passenger ship that was rarely permitted to leave the water nation because they disliked the idea of information leaving, was flying near the sea on the very edge of the water nation. A number of people were scanning the area, imagining what it would be like without the mist so heavily obscuring their vision. A few younger people, the majority of whom were in their teens, waited quietly and anxiously with the older people at the back of the ship. The majority of them wore black cloaks to conceal their faces. One of the cloaked individuals glanced about. Sounding Argonian, one said, "Where's Babette?" One of the teenagers, who also sounds Argonian but female, points out, "I think she's with the people at front." "Are you sure, Oshiva?" inquired the elder Argonian. 3 Argonians are present when the second teen says, "Yeah, I saw her walk off towards the front." With a sigh, one of the older ones started to move toward the front. The cloaked individual says, "I'll search for her." It sounds a little strange to a typical human, but almost no one would notice. An elderly man sitting close by with a tiny bundle in his arms caught the attention of a young girl who was looking around at the various types of people. Acting naive, she approached him and gazed at the bundle, which she believed to be a baby. She smiled and said, "Such a little baby, what's his name?" The elderly man chuckles as he glances at the girl. The elderly man smiles slightly and says, "His name is Sol Vandrake. I adopted him as soon as I heard the news about his parents, gods rest their souls." He hopes that his parents are at peace. With a hint of curiosity, the girl inquired, "What happened?" As he moves the infant from side to side, the elderly man explains, "His parents were killed by the Dark Brotherhood, now I'm all he has left. Now I have the chance to change both our lives for the better." This gave the girl a bad feeling, so she nodded and walked away, wondering what she was feeling. Sad. Now that they were out of the mist and the sun was almost rising, the girl thought, "No, that can't be. It's best to get some sleep." Although it has taken years since the 9-tailed fox attacked Leaf City, efforts are still underway to restore the city to its former splendor, but the process is moving slowly. Our favorite blonde boy was sitting next to a female patient with long, red hair who was comatose in the intensive care unit at the main hospital in Kanahagakure when the story started. The comatose patient was Kushina Uzumaki, Naruto Uzumaki's mother, with whom he would spend his weekends at the hospital. Naruto, who is now older than 4, is dressed in orange pants, a big white t-shirt, and big blue sandals. When Naruto turned to face the door, he saw Alex Ruler, his guardian, standing there in his regular police uniform. Naruto waved to him and he waved back. As he sat closer to his mother's bed and kicked his legs, Naruto grinned sweetly and joyfully while continuing to tell Kushina, who was unconscious, about his ongoing problems. And only the positive things, since he wanted his mother to be content until she woke up and wanted her to hear them. Naruto tells her, "Then the old man took me for ice cream, I had sprinkles with mine." Since a lot of people appeared to be hiding in the shadows, Alex remained by the door and continued to glance outside. This was also observed by an Anbu stationed outside Kushina's room, who was concealed beneath a cloak. However, it was there before Naruto arrived. The Anbu hid in his cloak and Alex asked, "Ever feel sorry for the kid?" The Anbu gave Alex a quick glance while displaying a cat mask, then turned away and shrugged. The Anbu demonstrates that he was a man by saying, "Never thought much about it. All I do is making sure no one tries to do anything to the patient." Alex questioned, "Why? Who'd want to hurt the woman?" When he looked down the hallway and saw what Alex saw, he stood more menacingly and watched as the people immediately fled. "I can't say," the Anbu told him. After receiving a nod from the Anbu, Alex laughed and said, "Well, I better get going. wouldn't want the kid to miss his bedtime and miss preschool, pre-academy. As Alex entered the room, he noticed that Naruto had wrapped up his conversation with his mother and was holding her hand. "Come on Naruto, time to get home." Naruto gives his mother a hug and says, "Okay, bye mummy, I'll see you really soon." He hopes she will return the hug. Many parents and kids avoided Naruto when he was at the playground, but some kids did play with him, Kiba Inuzuka, Shikamaru Nara, and Choji Akamichi. Because they were initially friendly with the former Hokage, the parents of the children were aware of Naruto and his parents. Since they had a few days off from work, Choza and Shikaku were dressed in what they called normal clothes. Choza's typical attire, which includes samurai-style armor, was based on manga and anime. This is seen as an honor to commemorate their progress over the years of their ancestors. Shikaku's attire was more traditional, similar to when he was first seen in the anime, except without the flak jacket, but he did appear to be wearing a bulletproof vest because he was too lazy to cover it up. Both of the old friends were happy to see their kids playing at the playground with Naruto and Kiba. Sume and her faithful companion Kuromaru, a wolf-like dog with an eye patch over its right eye, he still had both ears at the time, were seated close by. Sume was dressed in a dark green bulletproof vest and tight black clothing, which is the standard uniform worn by most shinobi. All flak jackets will be replaced by these, but they will still have pockets and shit. As they practiced fighting and techniques that would help them reach the rank of genin, they looked from Kiba and the kids to Hana Inuzuka and 3 small pups. Sume sighed as she glanced around and saw Alex standing close by, chatting with another uniformed officer. The two continued to gaze at the playground, waving now and then. Naruto's other officer, Alex, is playing on the swings with a girl who has brown hair in a bun. The officer was asked by Alex, "So how's it going at headquarters?" Looking around, the officer tells Alex, "Nothing new, just increasing in recruits and the occasional crook that tries to escape, but I have heard from my contacts that something's going on, but I haven't seen anything." The officer was in his late 20s, with long brown hair tied in a ponytail behind him and a small scar on his jaw. Alex asserts that it is true when he says, "Well, everyone thinks that we're corrupted Tenchi. Hell, every force always has some corruption, but everyone exaggerates." Tenchi, who dislikes the idea but knows that he hasn't survived this long by not taking precautions, tells him, "I hope you're right friend, and I hope that I can see my little girl becomes a woman, but we have to understand that we may not gain that hope, we should always take precautions." Alex tries to comfort his friend by saying, "I know Tenchi, but I do think you overthink this." Tenchi laughs and looks at the girl with the black hair and the pink blouse, saying, "You know me, Alex, I'm paranoid, and I haven't lived this long without it." Tenchi waves at him and then to the girl, saying, "Wife would want me home now, so I'll catch you later, Alex." "Come on sweetheart, time to get home," he rings. As Tenchi rushed over to her, the girl was still on the swings, climbing higher and higher. She released the swing and swung in his direction. The girl laughed with delight as Tenchi swore and hurried to catch her, landing hard on his back. The girl chuckled and said, "Niece catch daddy." Tenchi, who was experiencing back and limb pain from catching her, said, "Tenten, don't do that, you nearly gave me a heart attack." He lifted and threw her over his shoulder, carrying her like a bag of potatoes as some onlookers laughed. Tenchi laughs and says, "Now I hear that you want to live in a dumpster." "No I don't," Tenten exclaimed, kicking her legs and laughing. Alex walked to Naruto, laughing as he glanced up at the sky, or what little he could see from the lower levels, and realized that night was approaching. Alex calls, "Come on kid, time to go home." As he looks around, he notices that most parents follow suit because it typically rains a lot at night. Despite his disappointed expression, Naruto hurried away as his playmates rushed to their parents. However, he paused to smile at Alex. Naruto said, "Can we have ramen?" "We'll see." Alex laughed and turned to leave, telling Naruto to insist, "Please." Every few seconds, Sarutobi sighed as he sat at his desk at the Hokage Tower, going through a ton of paperwork. He then looked at his schedule for the following day and sighed once more. "I hate having to go to the Wind Nation." A tiny chuckle was heard close to the door, and 2 Anbu were standing there, guarding it but appearing more at ease than usual. Even though their faces were hidden by their hoods and they were wearing cloaks, they continued to stand there, occasionally laughing, while the Hokage simply gazed at them. The one on the left, who turned out to be a young woman, laughed and said, "Sorry Hokage, I just thought it was funny." The third laughed, The Hokage laughed and made mental notes about who would be suitable to take with him. Well, now I know who to take with me. As the Anbu huffed, the other Anbu laughed and said, "Ah. Come on." The Anbu laughed, sounding like a young, male adult, "Come on Itsuko, you enjoy the sun." Itsuko sounds intelligent as he says, "And I believe that you're coming as well, Kakashi-kun." Kakashi was seen cocking his head and glancing at the Hokage, who nodded and grinned. "Come on, I know we're allies with the nation, and I'm glad, but there are things in that desert that make our forest look like paradise." Kakashi was upset. The Hokage yawns and says, "True, but we've maintained a strong relationship with the Wind Nation and they've provided us with valuable resources." He sighed and got to his feet, feeling a few cracks in his back as he looked at the nearby clock and realized it was getting late. Sarutobi laughed and started to move toward the door, saying, "I better get going, a man my age needs rest." Sarutobi told them, "I can walk myself to my living quarters, you can go off early you too." The two Anbu exchanged a look and shrugged as he left the room, puffing away in a cloud of smoke, hoping to eat dinner before all the good spots were taken. Chuki and his young daughter Ayame owned the well-known small restaurant known as the Ichiraku Ramen Stand. They were frequent customers of the restaurant and were on first-name terms with the proprietors. Naruto was savoring his third bowl of ramen while Alex had just finished one. After finishing his third bowl, Naruto grinned as he glanced at the other customers and noticed that it was starting to rain outside. Naruto declares, "It's raining again." He doesn't care about the rain, he's just stating the truth. "Yeah, it never seems to not rain at nighttime, in fact I can't even remember seeing the moon." Alex tries to recall the moon's appearance, but all he can remember is that it was bright. According to Naruto, "I've seen it." Alex gave Naruto a curious look as he said, "It's big and round." Alex wondered when he had seen it. Alex dismisses it, assuming that Naruto either woke up early and saw it or believed he did. After paying for their meals, Alex said, "Come on kid, time to get you back home and ready for that preschool crap." He laughed when he saw Naruto daydreaming and made sure he was walking in the correct direction. The apartment that the third Hokage had given Naruto was not the best because it was closer to the lower sectors, but he was still lying in bed there. The Hokage attempted to elevate him to a higher level, but Naruto appeared to enjoy his home. In this city, the lower your status, the closer you live to the ground. In Naruto's experience, Alex usually sleeps on the windowsill and leans against the window, but he didn't mind because he appreciated that Alex remained near him. Naruto's mind returned to his moon memory. He is certain that it is the moon, but he is unsure of how he knows. After giving it some thought and wondering if it was just a strange dream, Naruto realized that he frequently has dreams about it. Naruto's mind fell asleep and he yawned because he was tired of thinking. As he sleeps, Naruto has a dream about the moon. When Naruto looked around, he saw nothing but darkness and a few tiny lights, but they didn't help. He then noticed that his hands were bigger than usual. After realizing that he was dressed in a suit that resembled Alex's armor, he saw that something was leaking from it. He didn't know how, but he was aware that air was escaping from his suit and that breathing was becoming more difficult. Uncertain of why, Naruto appeared to be floating around when he noticed something drifting close by that appeared to be a metal wall. Naruto continued to look around and saw what he thought was a planet, but his attention was diverted by objects exploding close to the planet. His vision was deteriorating by the moment, making it difficult for him to breathe, so he was unable to identify what it was. Looking to the right, Naruto couldn't help but smile at the big, bright, round ball that he recognized as the moon, one of the little pleasures one could hope for. Naruto sensed that he was getting closer to death, but instead of feeling scared, he felt calm and prepared for whatever lay beyond. A bright light flashes in front of Naruto as his vision deteriorates. Young Naruto jumped out of bed, panting, and looked around to see that he was still in his somewhat disorganized room, where he could see Alex sleeping soundly. Despite having a poor memory in the first place, Naruto recalled this dream from the time he was a child. According to Alex, he has a mental block that causes him to forget everything and typically wake up in pain in the hospital whenever Naruto leaves his or whoever is caring for him at the moment. Since he's grown accustomed to waking up to that dream, Naruto quickly fell back asleep. Alex snorted a little and opened his eyes. His back felt stiff as he stood up, and he groaned as he looked around quickly and saw nothing but darkness. His eyes gradually adjusted and he realized he was in Naruto's room. After leaving Naruto's room and entering the living room kitchen, he grinned while glancing down at the sleeping Naruto. Gazing around, Alex sighed. The kitchen area was to the right, with a small table and chair, a kitchen counter, a sink, and a small refrigerator. There was a tiny living room to his left, with a worn-out sofa from Naruto eating a lot of chocolate, a coffee table with a lamp, and a tiny TV in front of the sofa. Unaware that it had once belonged to Naruto's parents, Alex also recalled the HD charging up in the corner. However, its memory had been erased and created specifically for Naruto's care. Leaning back on the couch, Alex reached for the remote control and turned on the television. He yawned and flipped through the channels. When he discovered the news channel, he paused and calmed down. The female newscaster looks to her male coworker for further information as she reports, an additional 2 cases of rust rodent of unusual size has been reported near the lower levels. Yes, only 3 people were harmed, but they are said to make a full recovery. On a similar subject, about 11:39 p.m., a brutal animal attack has happened, killing 2 people. Evidence suggests that it was an off-species, most likely lichen, but none have been seen for the past 17 years, only occasionally showing after the purification was announced successful centuries ago, and our experts have examined and know that the off-species are nearly wiped out. The KMPF Konoha Military Police Force are also examining the evidence and are positive that the Inuzuka clan had nothing to do with it. The male reporter informs the audience. Alex sighed and rubbed his neck in mild discomfort. When the door knocked, he looked at it, became a little perplexed, and got to his feet. He approached the door with his gun in his hand, unlocked it, opened it, glanced out, and exhaled a sigh of relief. Alex saw his friend and fellow police officer standing there and said, "Tenchi, what the fuck are you doing here?" Tenchi responds, "Sorry, we're needed at the station." With a sigh, Alex entered the living room and turned on the HD, which turned to face him as its lights flashed. While waiting for orders, the HD bowed slightly and said, "Greetings, sir, is there anything that you require?" The HD nodded before it began cleaning the apartment, so Alex hurried over to the door and saw Tenchi waiting for him. "I'm going to be gone for a while. I want you to make sure Naruto is safe and that he reaches his preschool thing tomorrow at 7 a.m. Alex looks around the dim hallway, aware that no one is there, but more out of habit to spot any odd activity, and says, "Come on, Fugaku gets mad if anyone's late." The Hokage, dressed in traditional Hokage robes, was standing close to the metal gates of Konohagakure with a group of Anbu in cloaks. As he waited for their transport to arrive, he yawned. He turned to see the transport ship approaching, and he signaled for the Anbu to arrive, which they did when the ship came to a stop. It resembled a huge jet and was camouflaged green with the leaf symbol and the word ATC, Aircraft Troop Carrier, printed on the side. It resembled the Halo Troop Carrier in appearance. It was big and could easily accommodate more than 24 men and weapons. When the rear doors opened, 2 men, Kakashi and Itsuko, came out brandishing rifles and saluting the Hokage as he boarded the ATC with 5 Anbu. Sarutobi sat on one of the seats with the Anbu captain, who was also wearing a white cloak, signifying that he was a captain. The 2 men went back inside and shut the door behind them, taking seats close to the door and waiting while the other 4 Anbu sat in random locations. "Okay people, this is your pilot speaking, announcing that we will be reaching our destination in 16 hours, stopping outside the Wind Nation so you can reach the lovely sands of the barren wasteland." The pilot speaks through the intercom. With a sigh, the Hokage rubbed the back of his neck, but he was aware that every nation had a joke about every other nation. Theirs was more along the lines of, lost in wild, fertile, animal-filled, maddening woods. Itsuko, a young female Anbu, asks, "So why are we going to the Wind Nation?" The Hokage grinned as he glanced at her. The Hokage tells her, "We're trying to improve trade relations and improve our alliance with them." After asking, "Okay then, anyone up for cards?" Itsuko produced a deck of cards and gave them a shake. The Hokage laughed and made an effort not to ask to join in as a couple of Anbu laughed and approached her. As the HD walked alongside Naruto, who was bouncing with excitement at the lower levels of Konoha, Naruto paused and grinned outside the academy. The HD, which was bright yellow and had a body structure resembling a skeleton but much thicker, tells him, "Here we are little Naruto. I will come and collect you at precisely 4:15 p.m. Here is your lunch and I will buy groceries." Naruto grinned and accepted his lunch from the HD, who was holding it in front of him. "Okay." As he saw some of the kids who occasionally played with him, Naruto grinned and hurried off to the academy side entrance for all pre-academy students. "See you," he said. After several hours, the ATC was close to the Fire Nation's border. Etsuko grinned as she collected her winnings from the Anbu and 2 guards stationed at the entrance. Etsuko laughed, but Kakashi put his hand on the pile and revealed a hand of cards, saying, "And another win for me. I really thought you wouldn't take it easy on me boys. I may be a lady, but I'm more of a man than all of you." Etsuko cursed as Kakashi won with a winning hand. Etsuko grinned and said, "It doesn't matter, you're still my bitch Kakashi-kun." A puzzled Kakashi says, "Don't care, I won. A ninja doesn't rely on skill but luck," as he accepts his prize. This is the pilot speaking. "We're about to pass our borders and entering our allied nation known as the Time Nation. We have a green light on passing through and we will be landing within 3 hours." The pilot tells them. Etsuko grinned and began to shuffle her cards, saying, "Great, anybody for cards?" The majority of those on the ATC said, "No," and left, preferring to rest and risk losing more cash to Kakashi or Etsuko. Etsuko laughed and continued to shuffle the cards in her hands, saying, "Wimps." When Alex Ruler, Tenchi, and 2 other officers returned to Konoha, they found themselves in the lowest area of the city, surrounded by filthy metal walls and enormous pipes that emptied into the sewers. Tenchi moaned, "It stinks down here." After shining a flashlight down one of the pipes and observing rats fleeing, one of the unnamed officers laughed and said, "Don't complain now, we've got to examine the area and see if there are any big, bad wolves in this section." The 4th officer, who sounds more like the leader than the other 4, says, "Keep laughing Chuckles, one of these days, you're going to be killed." Alex looks at the 2 other officers and shines a torch down a larger pipe, aiming a gun down it but seeing nothing. I would tend to agree with Anabi, especially since we're risking an attack Russ. Chuckles wore standard police gear, a green beanie hat, a small black goatee, and lightly tanned skin. Anabi wore armor similar to that of his colleagues, but he had the Uchiha crest on his back. He had dark eyes and shoulder-length black hair. Chuckles chuckled as he looked beneath his feet and noticed a large stream of sewage water, smelling the mixture of what people flushed down their toilets. I'd rather die laughing than be as moody as the Uchiha. Especially in this heavenly place, I wonder why people don't come down here as often as we do. With a sigh, Tenchi stood close to one of the biggest pipes and observed the others. "Where the hell is Sergeant Keys? I thought you said that he, and a small team were investigating on anything suspicious down here." Tenchi responds. "The team that should have been down here should have met up with them by now," Anabi says, listening to the radio but finding nothing relevant to who they are searching for. "They should. Last I heard." Tenchi shouts, "Hey, I've found something," and reaches into the water to retrieve a handgun. He looks at the weapon and notices the numbers on it. It's police issued, looks like it's new standard. As he points his gun down the pipe, Anabi says, "That means that it can't be old, spread out people. We may have to go through the sewers." He hates the stench, but he knows that duty must come first. Alex coughed as the stench grew stronger and he asked, "You sure that the people being down here?" They screamed in fear as they heard more gunshots reverberating down the larger pipe. They appeared alarmed and quickly drew their weapons. A voice called out, "Fucking move it!" down the tunnel, making it nearly impossible to locate them. Another voice roared, "Bloodthirsty and beastly, they just keep coming." The 4 of them looked surprised. "We've got werewolves," Anabi exclaims as they charge ahead of everyone else and gradually disappear into the night with their scant light. With the light focused on him and Alex trying to keep up, Alex yelled, "Wait up Anabi. You're getting too far ahead," but was losing sight of him. "Hold up," Chuckles said, taking deep breaths and coughing violently as he fell behind. His light began to flicker quickly, and soon after, there was a grunt of pain and a splashing sound. Tenchi and Alex didn't notice and continued to charge as they watched Anabi turn what they believed to be a corner, his light disappear, and he ran faster before turning another corner and continuing to run. However, they both stopped and became concerned that they could only hear the sound of water flowing because there was no light to be seen. Alex shouted, "Shit, hey, where are you?" but got no response. Tenchi used his flashlight to look back, and his eyes widened in surprise at the absence of Chuckles. He shouted, "Fuck, Chuckles, Chuckles," and started to back away, but Alex grabbed him by the shoulder. Unsure of what to do, Alex grabbed his radio and yelled, "Wait. What the hell do we do? Go back to find Chuckles or go and find Anabi?" Looking back and forth, Tenchi exclaims impatiently, "It's no use. Radios don't work down here." Uncertain of what to do. Feeling as if they were being watched, Alex pointed his gun into the darkness and questioned, "What the hell are we going to do?" Tenchi muttered a curse and turned to face the future. Tenchi worries about Chuckles because he has been with him since the beginning and remembers being with him when he joined and when he became an officer. We're going to go on and find Anabi, we've got to find him, and he's our senior officer. Tenchi says. Not knowing what the hell was going to happen, Alex sighed and followed Tenchi as he hurried down the tunnel where he thought Anabi was down. This is going to get fucked. They were concerned as they continued down the tunnels because for a few minutes they could only hear the rancid water running past their feet. However, they soon heard gunshots coming from behind them, much louder than before. They exchanged startled glances before sprinting back the way they had come, but more animal roars caused them to accelerate and come to a stop close to the tunnel's exit. As Tenchi caught his breath, he jumped a little because he could see the flashes of the gunshots coming from the tunnel. After nodding at one another and tightening their hold on each other's sidearms, Tenchi glanced around the corner when he heard a scream and saw something large fly by his head. The two leapt back and aimed their flashlights at the creature, spotting a massive werewolf that was crouching but standing motionless for more than 7 feet. Its arms were strong but appeared weak, and it was a foot off the ground. It had a wolf-like appearance, but it still had a man-like structure, stood on its back feet, had terrible, diseased, blackish-gray skin that was bleeding from gunshot wounds, and had very little hair left on its body. Its mouth was drooling blood, making it difficult to determine whether it was its own or someone else's. A person in armor sprang up, coughing violently, looking terrified, and attempting to swim away from it as splashing came from between its feet. Tenchi screamed, "Fuck," as he and Alex emptied their clips at the werewolf. Tenchi fired 2 rounds into the werewolf's head, causing its brains to spray the wall behind it. The werewolf roared as it splattered blood everywhere with each shot, and it soon collapsed. With their flashlights shining, Tenchi and Alex hurried out of the tunnel and aimed, spotting 3 men running toward them and 4 more werewolves down the way. One of them shouted, "Fucking move," and shifted his gun behind him, firing a few rounds. Tenchi rapidly emptied his cartridge, reloaded it, and started emptying it again, hitting any werewolves that began to charge, while Alex became alarmed and swiftly grabbed the person in the water and pulled them up. Alex and Tenchi were spotted by the 3 men, who turned around and shot the werewolves with the last of their ammunition. The werewolves roared in rage and hurried away down the nearby tunnels, taking out one of them and dropping it into the stream. Everyone tried to slow their heart rates for a few seconds before Tenchi lowered his gun and approached the 3 men while inhaling deeply. As they flashed their lights at Tenchi and Alex, someone remarks, "Officer Tenchi. I'm glad to see that you're here, along with Alex." Tenchi held up his hand to shield his eyes from the light. His senior was fully armored but covered in shit, so he said, "Sergeant Keyes, good to see that you're alive." He looked at the other people and recognized one as a Uchiha, who was not a Navy but wore the same armor, and the other 2 he recognized from the office but had never spoken to. They were completely armored, with helmets covering their faces and armor covering their entire body. They were also covered in muck. "Bastard, he fucking ripped into me." Alex's assistance caused everyone to turn to face the woman, who had a deep gash on her chest with tiny sparks emanating from it and some minor scratches on her limbs that produced the same sparks. As he helps her to the edge to escape the dirty water, Alex exclaims, "Shit." Fearing more werewolf attacks, Alex asked, "Anyone got any medical?" Keyes tells them angrily, "No, we don't have any. The one that had it fled." He looked back the way they had come and yelled angrily, "We've already lost 3 officers. We were investigating for a possible lichen, we went in and found a fucking nest of them. Over a dozen of them, and that was just a random encounter." With sadness, Keyes tells them, "One died as we ran away and the other 2 ran away, we're sure they were hunted down and killed." Tenchi, who also dislikes losing people, tells him, "Well, we had 2 others, one of them was a Navy Uchiha, our ranking officer, we got separated from them." As he looks down the tunnel and hears growling, the Uchiha says, "Well, we've got to get out of here soon." He is aware that they will attack shortly. Tenchi wanted to locate the others, so she asked, "What about the others?" "Anabi and Chuckles." "Anabi won't die easy, Chuckles may very well be dead for all we know," returned the Uchiha, who was furious and eager to leave. "Relax, Yakumi and Tenchi, we'll look for them, but right now, we've got to get out of here," he says to them. "Now move out, that's an order." Tenchi and Alex exchanged glances, appearing a little alarmed and upset that Keyes was abandoning their group, but they nodded as everyone promptly reloaded, realizing that ammunition was now running low. As they all started getting ready, Alex assisted the injured woman in standing up in the hopes that they would leave as soon as possible. Alex looks at Tenchi, who shrugs, and says, "So where the hell are we going to run? I sure as hell don't know which way we came from." When Yakumi hears roars and spots a few werewolves running back out of the tunnels, she yells, "I don't care, I suggest we run," and fires, striking the werewolves as they rush forward. Keys shouts over the gunfire, "Get moving. Cover the wounded." Tenchi and Yakumi, "Cover our rear." Alex, "Help Felix move. Shim and I will be at front and will lead and provide cover." "Now move it." Everyone rushes to the front, where they fire at the werewolves. The group was running as fast as they could, but the werewolves kept vanishing and resurfacing in different tunnels, seemingly trying to lead them through different routes and trying to appear in greater numbers. They continued through the open tunnels, growing weary from their constant movement and fear. They hurried down another tunnel only to be forced to escape in a different direction when they noticed two werewolves blocking another tunnel. Shim shot at another werewolf that approached him and yelled, "They're fucking forcing us to go around in circles." He hurried down another tunnel to avoid being shot again. They fucking know the tunnels. As they made a sharp turn to a narrow tunnel, Felix swore in frustration and coughed loudly, "Oh really? I would have thought that werewolves that have spent their entire life here would be lost easily." They had to move quickly and crouch a little. Alex and Felix were pushed because they were moving too slowly and a werewolf was rapidly climbing into the tunnel. Tenchi and Yakumi were breathing heavily and reloading as fast as they could as they hurried down the tunnel. The two were frightened and pushed harder backwards, shooting the beast as it approached because the tunnel was too small for the werewolf to stand properly, but it was faster and appeared bloodthirsty. "Fuck," Keys yells as he and Shim shoot ahead of him, causing a werewolf to materialize in front of them. The werewolf charged, taking bullet damage but continuing to do so until the side of its head blew off. The two men were perplexed by this. A new face appeared out of nowhere, and they immediately took aim but stopped as soon as they saw it. Keys shouted, "Anabi, about time you found us," and rolled out the pipe hastily. Anabi begins a series of hand signals and says, "Sorry for the delay, sir." He commanded, "Everyone, get out." As the werewolf approached, Tenchi and Yakumi attempted to quickly flee, but Shim grabbed Felix and assisted Alex in pulling her out of the tunnel. Their hearts were racing. Yakumi let out a loud curse as his gun made a nasty metallic crack and stopped firing. He shouted, "It's jammed," and hurried down the tunnel. Tenchi screamed, "Fuck, don't leave me here you bastard." The werewolf was only a few feet away, and his gun was empty, so he cursed and shuffled backwards as quickly as he could, kicking the werewolf's face when it approached too closely. Tenchi exclaims, "It's a fucking brute," after being shot multiple times and being amazed that it survived. This went on for a few seconds, and Tenchi became even more terrified as it attempted to seize him but was only able to slit his shin and foot armor slightly. He felt his back click as he struck the pipe's edge and was pulled out, and something grabbed his shoulders and pulled him back. Anabi inhaled deeply and exhaled fire down the tunnel. Tenchi screamed in pain as his legs caught fire and he felt the heat of the fire, but he was swiftly kicked into the sewage water. This caused the werewolf to roar in rage and agony. Coughing hard and trying not to throw up, Tenchi leapt out of the water. Even though the office's armor was supposed to improve their performance, he yelled, "That's fucking wrong." As he stood up and felt excruciating pain in his legs, he then looked around and saw that everyone was worn out. With his pistol drawn, Anabi screamed, "The beast's dead. We've got to move," and turned to face Keys, the commanding officer. "I think this is where the exit is," he tells Keys. Keys glanced at the others and nodded. They started moving right away after he gave the order, same formation. "Anabi, you're at front. Now let's go." But Tenchi was finding it hard to keep up. They kept going in this manner for a minute until howls from the other tunnels forced them to hurry. Tenchi screamed in frustration, "So where the hell is the exit?" As his legs hurt more with every step he took and he continued to try not to throw up. With a quick glance around a corner, Anabi yelled back, "Should make it out very soon." But stopped abruptly when a large, dark, hairy object flew past with a nasty, metal-scraping sound. He shouted, "Bastard," and began shooting where the beast vanished to, but he stopped when he noticed flashes coming from the tunnel the beast came from. He looked quickly and arched an eyebrow in surprise when someone hurried out and fired at them. The bullets struck one or two of their armor platings, as evidenced by the metal pinging sounds that were produced as everyone dived and cursed. Keys shouted, "Hold fire! Hold fire!" and aimed his gun rapidly, attempting to identify the individual but failing to see their face. With a manly and panicked voice, the person yelled, "No fucking way, man. I've been fucking down here for fuck knows. And I'm looking for the field of flowers that was promised down here." Quote. Chuckles, Alex called, glancing over at his friend, who was covered in blood and feces. "Alex, where the fuck did you go? I fucking trip. A few minutes later and I can't find where the fuck you guys went." Chuckles was furious. "It's going to take a week to get the shit out of my teeth." Anabi shouted angrily, "We haven't got time," and moved forward. "Either come with us, or go away, your choice." Keys shouted, "That's right boys, time to get moving." And he and the others got up, but they noticed that everything had become quiet. They worried and touched everything, but everything appeared to be too calm. Even the beast from a minute ago was no longer there. He questioned, "Think we've scared them off?" They shined their fingers at the source and saw the man with keys, Shim, being hauled up a big pipe above them as a scream of horror and sporadic gunshots came rapidly. "Holy shit," exclaims the woman Alex is helping. With a loud curse, Anabi and Keys leapt onto Shim's legs and attempted to drag him away. Shim screamed in horror as blood trickled down his body, dropping his gun and sinking his hands into the pipe. "Don't fucking let go. Don't fucking let go. Fuck," he cried. Keys shouted, "Hold on Shim," and attempted to pull him down, but he and Anabi both felt their feet leave the ground. The only thing Shim could grasp was his ankles, so Yakumi hurried over and grabbed them, but it didn't stop him from being raised off the ground. Before they were dropped, Shim screamed in pain and gargled, splashing onto the sewage water. He recovered quickly and was pulled out of the water, horrified to see the majority of his throat torn out. When they saw the blood gushing from his throat and the spasms in his body as he clung to it as he rapidly bled to death, everyone knew he was dead. Anabi shouted, "We've got to move," knowing that if they don't flee, this will happen to everyone. However, everyone knew this, they simply didn't give it enough thought. Felix says, "Fuck," with sadness as he watches the man die. They glance at one another and realize that they were either on their last clip or had one more to spare when Chuckles tells them, "How much ammunition do you guys have? I'm nearly at the stage of making shooting noises to scare them off." Anabi shouted, "Well, we better move even faster than before," and started to move. With the exception of Chuckles, who went to the body, submerged his hand in the water, and retrieved Shim's gun before sprinting to join the others, everyone started to move. They panicked and ran faster when the howls started up again. This went on for a minute before the werewolves reappeared, which caused everyone to shoot quickly in an attempt to get them to leave. While Keys and Anabi led the group, Alex continued to assist the woman Felix in moving, while Yakumi, Tenchi, and Chuckles were in the rear, shooting at anything that moved. Yakumi threw his gun and fled, leaving the two behind, yelling in rage as he pulled quickly at his trigger and appeared alarmed as it stopped shooting. Tenchi started to yell back, "Oi, we're still shooting you fucking," but was interrupted when a werewolf tackled him and he crashed into the wall. Chuckles now appeared frightened. He yelled, "Get the fuck off him," and fired a fast shot at the beast. After a few seconds, the beast fell, and he hurried over to seize the body with one of the guns. Tenchi gasped in agony and sat up quickly as he yanked hard, forcing the creature to roll off him. Chuckles helped him up and asked, "You all right, mate?" Tenchi shouted, "Oh, I'm all right, fancy a cup of tea?" "Come on dumbass, we've got to move," and hurried off with Chuckles, attempting to catch up to the others fast. After running for a few seconds, the group abruptly stopped. Everyone turned to see the light coming from the tunnel and realized it was the sewer's exit. Everyone was running for the exit when Keys yelled, "Get moving." They stopped when 3 werewolves showed up close to the exit. Quote. "Fuck it, go through them," Anabi screamed, firing once before the gun stopped, forcing him to curse, throw the weapon away, draw a small blade, and charge forward, with Keys taking cover and Yakumi starting to make hand signals as he rushed ahead. Tenchi and Chuckles were still too far away from the group to take any action, but Alex and Felix pulled out their weapons and began shooting as well. Keys shot quickly as the werewolves charged, shouting angrily, "Let's go." A werewolf sprang at Anabi, but he ducked and cut its arm, severing it with the blow and causing the werewolf to roar in pain and rage. Anabi was about to attack the beast when it rushed down a pipe and fled, but the second werewolf quickly tackled it, causing Anabi to yell angrily and stab the werewolf with his blade. Keys' eyes widened in shock as the third werewolf rushed past him, rushing past the second and toward the others. His gun ran empty, and he swore and sprang to the side. With a loud curse, Felix and Alex pushed each other aside as the werewolf jumped in their direction. They both took out their guns and fired, striking the creature's head on both sides. Alex and Felix looked shocked as the werewolf's head exploded from the gunshots and splashed into the water. They turned to see Tenchi and Chuckles running in their direction. Tenchi said, "That was a good move." He assisted Alex in getting up while Chuckles assisted Felix. He stood up again, hoping to see Anabi stab the beast in the chest, causing blood to flow quickly onto him. As the beast appeared to grow heavier, Anabi cursed. Yakumi hurried over to them, inhaled deeply, and exhaled fire, devouring the beast and forcing Anabi to inhale deeply before plunging into the water. After a few seconds, Anabi jumped up and began coughing violently as the werewolf fell into the water, extinguishing the flames but causing the sewage water to flow down. He shouted, "That's fucking wrong. We've got to get going." Keys cried, scrambling to his feet and heading for the door. The other members nodded and hurried to the exit, their hearts pounding more rapidly as they did so, the howls growing louder. Keys, Yakumi, and Anabi led the group as they ran as quickly as they could when a few werewolves started to emerge and charge at them. The others were slower because they were more tired than before. Chuckles screamed in horror as he was being dragged away after one of the werewolves lunged forward and managed to grab hold of his leg. With horrified looks, Tenchi, Felix, and Alex hurried back and grasped his hand in an attempt to drag him away. Chuckles screamed, "You shoot me if they take me." Tenchi swore, drew his gun, and took aim as the werewolf's nails tore through his armor. He screamed, "Don't shoot me now." When Tenchi's gun ran empty, he panicked and was tackled by another werewolf, causing him to scream as they rolled away. Tenchi had shot at the werewolf, striking its chest, but had failed to kill it. Watching his friend get attacked, Alex appeared terrified, but he lost his balance as the werewolf pulled harder. Felix had to lean against the wall in fear, and she swiftly drew her gun and began shooting at Tenchi's assailant while holding Alex's ankle to prevent him from being taken away as well. Alex screamed, "Let go your fucking dog," as he struggled to hold Chuckles, but his hold was becoming weaker. Chuckles continued to yell, "Don't you fucking let go," but his hand escaped Alex's hold and was being quickly pulled into the shadows. Chuckles yelled, "Fuck," as he looked over his shoulder and screamed in horror as multiple werewolves charged at him, tearing into him and dragging him away. Alex exclaimed, "Chuckles," and hurried to his feet, but he was startled when a number of werewolves appeared from the pipes. He turned to face Tenchi in terror after realizing that Felix had killed the beast. "Fuck," Alex screamed, helping Felix up and rushing over to Tenchi. However, one of the werewolves soon tackled him, causing him to curse in agony and Felix to look shocked as she hit the ground. "Shit," Felix screamed, aiming quickly, and firing at the beast. A strange thing happened when she did so. The beast flew away after the majority of the werewolf's head and right shoulder were blown off. Felix glanced at her gun, but then something metallic moved, causing her eyes to widen and turn back. She appeared shocked to see a DRD that appeared to her to be an angel. The large torso, shoulders, and arms, the gray body armor, the blinding white line across its face for eyes, and the right arm that was raised to reveal what appeared to be a small cannon from its wrist. As the cannon returned to its wrist, its curved thumb and three claw-like fingers emerged, followed shortly by two blades that emerged from its other wrist. After passing Felix and Alex and charging in the direction of the growing number of werewolves, the DRD heard two more metallic footsteps behind Felix. She turned to see two more DRD approaching. One had a small cannon in its right hand and blades in its left, while the other had just its hands. The other DRD rushed over to Felix, grabbed her shoulder, and pulled her so hard that she went sliding down the tunnel as the armed DRD charged forward. As Alex watched the two DRD bots get dog-piled by the werewolves, the DRD did the same to him, causing some of them to fly with each hit the bots delivered. Reaching down, the third DRD rushed to Tenchi's location, yanked out a bloodied officer, and sent him hurtling toward the exit. It turned both of its wrists into cannons as it glanced back. It directed them at the growing number of werewolves, exploding them and leaving either enormous holes or severed limbs. While an ATC displayed its lights at the exit, Alex pulled Tenchi out of the stream and placed him against the wall because he was coughing violently outside. When he noticed multiple scratches on Tenchi's skin, Alex swore. Felix also coughed violently, finding her brief journey to be quite uncomfortable, and pulled her in their direction. Felix glanced around and saw that, despite their ninja training, the two Uchiha officers appeared worn out and Keys was talking on his radio. Tenchi coughed, turned to face Alex, and laughed. "If I fucking get infected. I'm going to kill every single one of them before I turn. He said, remind me to get Tenton a gift, which caused Alex to laugh. Alex relaxed a bit and laughed, as long as it isn't a gun. Felix inhales deeply as she starts to take off her helmet, saying, after I'm patched up. After successfully unlocking the helmet and making the two guys laugh, she declares, I'm going to get myself laid. Tenchi glanced at the woman before she took off her helmet, which caused Alex to raise his eyebrows as he looked down, wanting to go to sleep. Tenchi introduced himself and primarily tried to attract her attention to Alex Ruler. I'm Tenchi, and this is my good friend Alex Ruler. He's currently single and is looking for either a girlfriend or a quick roll in the sack. Alex gave him a perplexed look before laughing and turning back to face the woman, leaving his gob dangling. Alex couldn't help but smile at the woman's attractive appearance, which included blonde hair tied in a bun, soft blue eyes, and sweaty, pale skin. Hi, Alex Ruler. What's your name? Replied Alex. Mio Yamanaka. She laughed, attempting to ignore the fact that they were in the worst area of the city, right next to the sewer. Alex looked surprised and said, well, maybe when we get out of here, want to hang out or something. Mio started to say, well, but someone interrupted them. When the person yelled, we've got to get moving. Now, they turned to see a soldier and the ATC hovering nearby, with the 3 officers already on it. Alex helps up Mio and says, okay, you help Tenchi up and I'll help Mio up. While the soldier assisted a laughing Tenchi, Mio grinned and hurried to the ATC. Oh, aren't you a gentleman? She asked. Both of them leapt onto the ATC as it took off, and as they looked back, they saw 2 DRD bots racing in their direction. 2 medics promptly arrived to ensure that none of the 3 officers were in imminent danger after they either sat down or practically collapsed to the ground. After a few minutes, the group started to feel the pain and fatigue from what they had just gone through, and they gradually started to grieve for everyone they had lost. The fallen Tenchi pats Alex on the shoulder as he says, chuckles, man. I should have held on tighter. He looks at the 2 DRD bots and says, don't beat yourself up too much. I doubt that you could have done more than you'd done. He then turns to see one of the soldiers making his way to the center. The soldier tells them, looking very irritated, okay everyone. I've checked with the DRD bots, and they couldn't find anyone else within that sewer pipe, and we also lost a DRD to get you guys out of there. Alex cursed, hoping that Chuckles would be saved because he had some hope for him because a DRD was missing. Alex turned to face Tenchi as he said, you know something. Alex nods, not really remembering his name at all, but praying for him as they make their way to the hospital. I can't remember what Chuckles' name is. I've been calling him it since we were kids, even his family called him that. Tenchi tells him. After more than 2 hours, the ATC carrying the Hokage made a safe landing, halting close to the edge of their country's border at a small town. After the lengthy journey, the majority of the Hokage's Anbu guards stretched and yawned as they left. After looking around and cracking her knuckles, Itsuko said, so, who else needs the toilet after that journey? She inquired, what's this place called? I think the locals refer to this town as the Hourglass Neck. Sarutobi told her as he led Itsuko to a railing. Kakashi laughs when Itsuko says out loud, strange name, first time in the Time Nation and they have weird names. Sarutobi points over the railing and tells her, well, this is their only way to the Wind Nation, it rather unique in a way. She gives him a perplexed look. When she looked ahead, she saw that there was a small exit leading to a large plain of sand at the end of a triangular-shaped pit that was filled with sand. Itsuko says, I assume that's the Wind Nation. Yes, and this town used to be at the bottom of this pit, but it slowly filled with sand and the people of this town tried to stop it, but it filled like an hourglass. They abandoned the town and built one on top here, and the town below us was swallowed up by the sand, thus naming their own town. Sarutobi told her, causing her to nod with curiosity. Sarutobi points to a very long and enormous cable that was connected to something resembling a transmission tower. Near the bottom of the cable was a large tram. Since then, they've added a tram system to allow an easy access to the Wind Nation's capital, and its star right here. Under his mask, Kakashi grinned and walked toward it with Sarutobi and the others, saying, looks interesting. The police officers were all in one big ward at Konohagakure's main hospital, looking worn out and depressed from the entire experience of living in the sewers. The doctor told half of the group, then turned to face the other members. Now then, Sergeant Keys, You've only suffered some fractures, some bad exhaustion, but you're okay. Both Anabi and Yakumi Uchiha, you're just suffering from chakra exhaustion and some bruises. Alex Ruler, you've just suffered from some fractures. Mio Yamanaka, you've suffered from chakra loss, several scratches, non-fatal thankfully, and some fractures. Tenchi, several fractures, several deep scratches. We're still running the blood work, but we're sure that you're not infected. Worst case scenario, you'll have a large craving for raw meat and other traits. The doctor gave them the news. Tenchi rubs his bandaged wounds and says, "Fucking bastards." He is relieved that he will live to see his wife and child again. So, Tenchi is just going to act more like a dog than usual. Alex said, laughing a little but still feeling depressed about losing a teammate. Tenchi scowled at Alex as their room's door opened. Tenchi yelled, "Fuck you, you stupid piece of, hey. How's my angels doing?" And everyone turned to see a young girl with long, blackish hair hurrying toward him while dressed in a blue skirt and a pink blouse. A woman with very dark brown hair tied in a bun, a light blue dress, and lightly tanned skin was standing behind her, glaring at Tenchi. With a little conceit on her forehead, the woman tells him, "Good save, sweetheart." Alex looked at Mrs. Tomei and bowed, getting a little chill. "Hello Mrs. Tomei, you're looking pleasant today." Tomei grinned and said, "Please, just call me Tomei." Alex simply glanced at Tenchi, who did his best to keep his daughter from jumping on him, before turning to face Tomei and lowering his bow. Alex quickly leaves her and sits down next to Mio, saying, "I'm fine with just calling you Mrs. Tomei." Mio questioned, "Why are you acting like that? She's nearly twice my age and the last time I didn't use Mrs., I had 2 black eyes, and she scares me more than Tenchi drunk and in his personal armory. Or the thought of Tenchi pushing his interest of weapons onto his girl Tenten." Alex clarified, "Mrs. Tomei may look young, but she's nearly in her 40s. She questioned him, "And who is she to your friend?" "She's his wife, and the girl with them is their kid obviously, rather late on having kids, I know, but Tenchi's been my friend since school and he's always been a fan of the older ladies." Alex informs her. Mio observes the couple conversing and remarks in a perplexed tone, "They sound like fun." Once more, the door opened, and a little blonde boy entered. He glanced around and noticed Alex. The boy yelled, "Uncle Alex," and rushed over, jumping on him. Tomei gave him a glare and caused him to curse in agony. After picking up the child, Alex cast a pitying glance at Tomei. Mio grinned and sat up slightly, staring at Naruto as Alex laughed and made him laugh, saying, "I told you, I'm not your Uncle Naruto." Mio asked, drawing attention from both Alex and Naruto. "So who's your little friend?" Alex laughed and hung Naruto upside down, making him laugh. "This little knucklehead here is Naruto. I pretty much spend most of my time with the kid. Hokage recommended me and I've been looking after the kid since he was a noisy, smelly baby." Alex laughed and got a laugh in return. "And I assume you had your HD bring you here, right Naruto?" Alex asked. Mio grinned, but she was taken aback because, despite appearing to be just any boy, Naruto was actually the 9-tailed fox container. She introduced herself, saying, "Then hello Naruto, I'm Mio." Naruto gave her a smile. Alex and Mio turned to face Naruto as he asked, "How old are you?" Alex gave Mio a startled look when she said, "I'm 19 years old, and how old are you Naruto?" Naruto grinned and said, "Nearly 5. 19, rather young to be seeing this kind of action, aren't you?" Alex responded, "I'm a part of a family from one of the main clans, I've been trained as a kunoichi, so I can look after myself, and how old are you?" Mio responded with a smirk. Alex laughed, 21, out loud. Alex tells him, "But I trained and graduated early." Mio and Alex looked at Naruto with annoyance as he laughed and said, "You're old." Alex smirks and says, "How about I knock you out and you'll be older when you wake up?" Naruto laughs and turns to face Mio as he recalls something. Alex said, "Hey, you doing anything, soon?" Which caused Mio to grin at him. Mio laughed, maybe. Why? Well, I wanted to, Alex started, unsure of how to proceed. When Tenchi and Mio heard Naruto's innocent smile, they burst out laughing. "Uncle Alex wants booty." Alex became tense in surprise and almost dropped Naruto. Mio chuckled as she watched Alex mentally strangle Naruto, saying, "Well, I'll have to think about it." It was almost sunrise outside the Wind Nation city, and a great monorail that ran the length of the Wind Nation was on its way to the Sand City. A number of leaf Anbu were inside the monorail, and an old man wearing a white robe sat inside as it traveled in what appeared to be a sandstorm's direction. A young man wearing Anbu battle armor declares, "Lord Hokage, we're about to reach the Sand City." "Thank you, Kakashi." Sarutobi grinned as he looked out at the empty desert, knowing that there were enormous creatures beneath it that made the monorail appear small. With a sigh, Kakashi took off his helmet, leaned against the chair, and another Anbu approached him to take a seat beside him. The woman, who was also wearing black Anbu battle armor, asked, "So how have you been, Kakashi?" While holding his hand and sounding feminine, Kakashi appeared as he usually does, but he was younger and less anxious. Kakashi grins and squeezes her hand, saying, "I've been fine, I've missed you." In addition to having thin lips and lightly tanned skin, the woman had white hair with spiky bangs that held to the left, almost concealing her light blue eyes. She took off her helmet and set it next to her. "Not as much as me." She grinned and kissed Kakashi, who was still wearing the mask over his lower face. They remained that way for a few seconds before someone coughed behind them. The woman blushed and abruptly stopped kissing Kakashi. She attempted to cover her face as he held her hand once more and laughed. One of the other Anbu asked him, laughing as he witnessed the young couple become somewhat embarrassed, "Enjoy that?" Kakashi laughed and replied, "Yeah." Under his mask, Kakashi grinned and squeezed the young woman's hand, receiving a squeeze in return. "I really like that, Itsuko." Sarutobi said in a somewhat perplexed tone, "You two do know that you've been working on the same missions for a while now, right?" Itsuko crosses her legs and responds, "Yeah, but we hardly have the time to just relax anymore." The Anbu captain, whose features are obscured by his white cloak, says, "And as soon as you relax, the worst seems to come." "Yeah, but this is a one-way track that's attacked between 2 points. One is to our ally, the Sand, and the other is also to our ally, the Time Nation, and all life around this area is non-existent but the giant stingrays, and they already make people nervous in case they land on them." Itsuko replied with a grin. As he looks out at the little storms that are brewing, the captain remarks, "That may be true, but it only takes one time to screw up." He says, "We're close." When Itsuko looked out, her eyes widened a little because she saw a huge, round mountain that resembled a wall. However, what really caught her eye was something that appeared to be a giant tornado or sandstorm on top of the mountain. She recalled the tale of how it had for years protected the Sand City better than most walls, but she couldn't recall what had given it its power. The storm whirled around quickly, appearing ready to tear apart anything that should enter it. "How does the sand wall work? 'Cause it looks very interesting," says Itsuko. Sarutobi looks at the team and concludes, "No one really knows. There are rumors, but it isn't my place to say." The team was about to stop at the lower levels of the wall or mountain. Itsuko puts on her helmet to hide her face and says, "All right then." Kakashi promptly followed suit. A few minutes later, the monorail came to a stop just outside the second lowest section of the wall. The doors then opened, and the Hokage and the Anbu group exited. The Cage in his traditional cage robes and a few Sand Shinobi in battle armor welcomed the group. Both the Cage and the Hokage bowed. The Cage says, "Welcome, I hope your journey was all right." The Hokage grinned and turned to face the whirling wall of sand, saying, "It was all right, I hope that your city is well." The Hokage nodded and followed the Cage as he turned and walked toward the wall, saying, "It's doing fine." The Hokage turned to see his squad walking behind him, accompanied by a few Sand Junin. Sarutobi looks ahead and says, "I see that you still run a tight shift around these parts." Gazing at the swirling sands, the Cage informs him, "Of course, we are making sure that no one tries to infiltrate our city. We've had several attempts already. They've tried to get in through the sands since it's mostly unguarded, but we have patrols on both sides and the infiltrator would be too hurt to do anything but more a few feet away from the sand." He tells him. Sarutobi appeared a little taken aback by this revelation, but he recognized that someone would want to know what they had and sell it to others for a profit. After witnessing the Cage stop on metal flooring close to the stone wall, Sarutobi asked, "So who has been trying to enter your city?" He turned to see the others enter the metal flooring and felt the floor shift, recognizing it as an elevator. Shinobi of different villages, one from the Earth Nation, the others we never found out who they are since they died before we got any information from them. The Cage informs him. The Hokage looked up and saw that they were near the middle level. "I see, even after all this time, the Earth Nation still tries to spy on us." The Cage says, "Yeah, they will always be a pain." The metal floor stopped as they reached the top of the middle level, where they saw 4 individuals with hoods over their faces. The lead one said, "Oh, I can smell your blood." With a ravenous voice, he drew a knife and leapt forward, aiming for the cage's throat. However, he only took a step to the right and punched the man in the throat, causing him to cough violently and drop to his knees. One of the others shouted, "Kill them," and drew a gun, aiming at the cage without observing that their eyes were darkening. The bullet was stopped by hitting something made of gold. As the others started to react, the attacker fired blindly as the golden dust flew in his direction and covered his face. While the others were preparing for an attack, Kakashi leapt forward as the other 2 swiftly drew their weapons, one brandishing a kunai and the other a second gun. The gun-wielding assailant fired at the Hokage, but Kakashi blocked the bullet's path, causing it to bounce off his armor but leaving a tiny dent. As the final attack charged at the guards, swinging the kunai towards a Sanjunin, the attacker fired multiple more times, causing the bullets to deflect off Kakashi's armor and cause minor dents. The Junin swiftly drew a katana to block the kunai, but the katana sliced through the blade as the kunai struck it, swiftly piercing the victim's chest. The attacker pushed the Junin backwards, off the elevator floor, and caused him to fall after he screamed in agony. Sanjunin and the Leaf Anbu then drew projectile weapons and fired at the melee attacker, swiftly killing him and causing him to fall off the platform. Itsuko, a small Leaf Anbu, disappeared and then resurfaced in front of the final assailant brandishing a gun. She drew a sword and swung it in the attacker's direction. Itsuko was able to cut through the assailant's side, causing him to scream in agony before collapsing and swiftly leaving this life. Looking back, Itsuko yelled angrily, "No one attacks him. You got it," and could see that Kakashi was a little taken aback. The first attack's shoulder was grabbed by the cage as he pulled off the person's hood to reveal a man's face, somewhat surprising the Leaf Ninja that the assailant was a male vampire. "My clan shall take your city," the vampire exclaims, panting as he watches the final surviving assailant collapse backward, slowly suffocating to death from the gold dust. The vampire struggled, but the cage snapped its neck and watched as it fell to the ground, remaining motionless. The cage approached from behind and grabbed the vampire's jaw and the top of its head. The Hokage was a little taken aback by the cage's action, but as the sun rose, the vampire's body started to smoke and eventually caught fire. With a silent thank you to Kakashi for obstructing his path, Sarutobi said, "May I inquire why there was a vampire within the city limits?" As the cage approaches the edge and looks down, he sees people assisting the Sanjunin and bewildered by the dead assailant. "We had a small vampire group manage to get inside our city. This was about 2 years ago and we are still killing their group. They're persistent and we're still trying to find their leader. They'll panic and flee the city." He was irritated that a shinobi of the sand had succumbed to vampires' abilities and reasoned that, "They must have charmed one of our shinobi. The Junin is all right, we can move on." Sarutobi said, "I see, do you require any help clearing them out?" As the cage lifted his hand and the gold dust around the limp attacker, the attacker coughed violently and took deep, panting breaths. His hood dropped, revealing a woman with dirt covering her face and slightly glowing eyes. "Not really, we've got things handled here, but if you want to assist, then you can." The cage commands his shinobi, "Men, take the thrall, you know where to place her." The Leaf Anbu and Hokage looked bewildered as 2 nodded and took the woman by the arms and pulled her away. Kakashi inquired, "Where do you take them?" The cage tells him, "We have had several people taken by the vampires and turned into charmed followers. They require a lot of rehabilitation." They proceed to the wall and soon approach a tunnel that is surrounded by several guards. The Hokage tells the 2 youngest Anbu, "Kakashi, Itsuko, I feel that we've got to assist them, so I'm allowing you 2 to assist in finding any sign of the vampire race, but don't get yourself hurt." The group enters the tunnel, and the armed guards bow their heads in respect as the tunnel's tiny lights scan the group. Itsuko nodded as Kakashi said, "Very well, Lord Hokage." Itsuko looks back and sees her allies behaving normally, but she knows they don't know why the Hokage wanted this, but they never question it. "We'll make sure to contribute with the Sand's vampire problem and help wipe them out while we're here." After hearing all of this, the cage halted at the end of the tunnel and turned to face a Kunoichi who was standing close to the exit. She gave him a nervous nod, and he pointed out 2 Anbu that were roughly her height. "Idgrod, you're partly involved in the investigation. I want you to take these Leaf Anbu to Sector 13, they're assisting in that area for those disappearance that may be involved in the vampire race." She says, "Hello," and both of them nod. The two Anbu follow her as she says, "You can follow me," and turns to leave. The cage started to move and stood, looking toward the city. "Now then, shall we head to the cage tower? Or do you wish to rest before we spend hours over our alliance agreement?" he asked. The visitors looked and were a little impressed by the tall building that was constructed inside the round mountain walls. The floor and walls seemed to be composed of sand or stone. The buildings had distinctive designs, similar to those in the Naruto series. The Hokage glanced down at his feet and brushed the sand off the floor, revealing a metal floor that was quickly obscured by the sand. Interesting, Sarutobi thought, must be magnetic sand to create the distinctive appearance and jutsus that require it, or something else. The Hokage laughed and said, "Well, I'm good either way, my friend." The Hokage sighed a little, growing weary of riding monorails, and the cage nodded as the group started down the walkway and soon came to rest close to another one. The man in the black cloak, Norio, was bored while watching from his control deck window as a number of gleaming objects approached the planet from the Black Horse Station, a space station orbiting it. "Fucking hell, another group of pods heading towards us, scan them," says Norio. "Scanning. By the looks of things, a few of them are escapees from that gladiator slave trade that keeps coming by to examine and take over our world master." He is told by a scientist. The leader hired the other hunters, and they're acting edgy. "Do you have any clue where they're going to land?" Norio inquired. "Well, by the looks of it, they're going to split in half. The larger half of the pods are going to crash at the Fire Nation. The smaller half is going to crash at the Water Nation. They're going to land in the sea. Far from any land, they'll be lucky to survive." The researcher informs him. As the gleaming pods approached his planet, Norio sighed and gazed at them, thinking, it should be interesting to have new people coming. Any power signals coming from them? Another scientist tells him, only a few of them, nothing major, but one does have the power of a normal Junin. Norio said, interesting. As the pods headed for the land, they struck the atmosphere and burst into flames. The scanning scientist points to a quarter of the planet and says, "Congratulations, sir. I think we may have just detected one of your people, but we lost the signal and only know it's in this section of the planet." With a sigh, Norio watched the segment of the planet appear on a big screen close to him. "Keep observations on the newcomers, I'll see where the bastard is," he said. Over half a dozen flaming objects, two of which were much farther ahead than the others, fell from the sky several miles away from the Leaf City. The objects were circular, and then an object suddenly fell from their backs, turning into a piece attached to a wire on the circular objects. This caused the pods to slow down significantly, putting out the flames, and the wire quickly snapped off, allowing the objects to fall freely. The objects hit the ground and created a little explosion, and the smoke cleared quickly and white, round objects were pods. A strange door on the side opened, and two people staggered out. One of them was a big, muscular creature with a dirty yellow skin and red armor, and he coughed and got up quickly, revealing that he was a Krogan. The second one staggered around on the ground, coughing hard and trying to breathe, but was unable to do so. He wore some sort of armor, but it was severely damaged, and his body was covered in blood and several scars, both new and old. He was holding onto a katana, clenching it tightly as he fell to the ground, gasping constantly. "Hey, are you okay, Zargos?" Seeing that the alien was having trouble breathing, the Krogan yelled and hurried to the pod, removing a mask and a plasma shotgun before rushing to the alien. "Your species are really too sensitive to different air." With a shout, he put the mask on his face and pressed a few buttons, causing a breathing sound to emerge. Zargos, the alien, leapt to his feet, coughing violently and gripping his throat. "Thanks, this is better," he says in a croaky voice that sounds remarkably human. When the flaming object, which he knew to be pods, approached, the Krogan looked up and said, "We must move. The fucking slavers are on their way," he yelled, moving to the pod that the alien got out of and grabbed something inside and quickly handed the alien a handgun. "Let's move." The alien nodded, recovered rapidly, and followed him as he yelled and began to move into the woods' cover. A short distance away, a group of Leaf Anbu returned from a mission, still fully armored in their black battle armor, and rested for a short time before heading back to Leaf City. They were perplexed by the unusual winds blowing, and they glanced at one another as they heard radio static. They immediately cleared the signal and heard a radio signal. "This is for anyone within or near Outer Sector 17. We have had a disturbance and believe that there are AX alien crash site within that area, require immediate action." The person on the radio gave the order. This is Shisui. We are near the facility. We are already returning from a mission, but we'll investigate the area. Shisui looked at the others, received a nod from everyone else, and swiftly disappeared after the shortest person picked it up and gave it to the second shortest. When the Hokage and Cage were in the Cage's office in Sand City, they stood and looked out the large window at the city, which was working hard as everyone moved through the slightly windy streets. This really is a beautiful city, the Hokage says, observing the city and a building that is right in the middle of it, taller than all the other buildings, and all the buildings that are close to or next to it appear to be abandoned. He also noticed that the tower was mushroom-shaped, and that electricity kept striking and flowing up the tower. The Cage sighs a little as he looks at his city, wanting it to be better but only managing to stay standing. Yeah, we sometimes have to repair the city every once in a while, but we remain strong. With a smile and in accordance with the fourth Hokage's beliefs, the Hokage tells him, I know, you're a strong nation, having allies that can help you can make you so much stronger. So, shall we go through the new agreements? The Cage nodded in response to the Hokage's question. The Sand Kunoichi, who was roughly their age and named Idgrod, was standing with the two Anbu, Kakashi and Itsuko, in a glass elevator in the lower levels of the Sand City, heading downward. We'll be there soon, the girl said, looking at the top and seeing letters and numbers coming from a screen, seeing it say Sector 15 and then hit Sector 14. So, what makes Sector 13 unique? Kakashi inquired. We've had a few disappearances and a house was burned down. Many people don't think it was an accident. Idgrod tells them. How are you involved in the investigation? Kakashi asks. I see. Did he ask? As the elevator stops and the glass doors disappear, Idgrod tells him, well, it's where I live. My mother is a council member and she runs the area. I have an obligation to fight and protect the sector. This place has seen better days. Itsuko says, kicking a can nearby, as they walked outside and looked around, quickly becoming confused while Idgrod seemed unfazed by the state of the place, which was a large, open area with towering buildings still nearby, trash all over the place, and walls that appeared slimy and dirty with multiple cracks. As he took a few steps forward, Idgrod said, we're at the lower sectors of the city, it's bad, but we have tried to tidy it up, but people are scared of disappearing. We get most of our income for this sector, we run a water system, and some mines are owned by my mother. Kakashi and Itsuko also looked down and noticed a very large pond. As he looks up at the sky and higher levels, people going about their daily lives, and sand falling from the higher levels, Kakashi remarks, impressive, I would have thought it would be hard to maintain water in a desert. As Idgrod proceeded along the left path, he passed several guards who bowed their heads. Kakashi noticed that they were completely covered in low standard light battle armor, and the guards simply stared at the two-leaf Anbu with curiosity, wondering why they were here at all. So where are we going? Idgrod informs them, to my mother's, she would want to know about you and your partner. How were you aware of our relationship? Idgrod gave Itsuko a perplexed look, and Kakashi sighed in response to his question. That's my mother's place, it's not much, but it's good enough. Idgrod responds, I didn't, and they turn a corner, moving toward a building that was held up by balusters and situated between two tower blocks, appearing less run down than the rest of the area. That's my mother's place, she says, receiving nods from both of them. Looks like your standard escape pod to me, said one of the four members of the Anbu group who had landed in the middle of a tree line filled with craters in the Fire Nation. He opened his cover and sniffed the air, revealing a dog-designed face screen. He had a scar down the right side of his face and the Inuzuka's face marks. And it smells like they didn't get far, an hour tops. Putting their hands together, one of the others wearing a bird-like screen said, Byakugan. They are about 50 minutes away in a northwest direction. They appear to be tracking someone, or something. The Anbu, known as a Hyuga, tells them. He shouted, glancing around the area. Before they disappear, Shisui says, I see, we best follow them quickly, they could be the enemy, or require assistance. Everyone nods. When Kakashi, Itsuko, and Idgrod arrived at the Sand City, they saw a number of people shouting angrily at an old woman, and guards made sure that nobody approached her too closely because they were upset. You should be protecting us. Why don't you perform your duties? Among them, one shouted. We're giving it our all. With a calm expression, the elderly woman looks at everyone and says, we have investigated the odd deaths and disappearances. One of the men protecting the elderly woman, who is not wearing a helmet and is dressed differently from the other guards, says, come on people, I know that you're angry, but we are doing our best to protect you in this area. He is a man with dark, blonde hair and a few facial scars. When Idgrod, Kakashi, and Itsuko walked forward, the others simply sighed and made crude gestures before leaving. The elderly woman approached Idgrod, grinned, and said, "Ah, how have you been, my child?" The older woman inquired. Idgrod tells her, "I'm fine, mother. These two are from the Leaf City and are here to assist in the investigation." The older woman nods. The woman informs them, "Very well then, I am Idgrod Ravencrone, I look after this sector." "You gave your daughter your name, then?" Itsuko inquired. The elder Idgrod tells them, "Yes, we've done it for several generations." As she glances around, she soon notices an old man approaching them while holding hands with a young boy who is looking around with interest. "Ah, Furui, I see that you came to bid farewell before you leave." She smiles. As he looks at the leaf Anbu, the elderly man known as Furui says, "Yes Idgrod, me and my grandson Sol will be leaving for another long journey." Furui asks incredulously, "I take it that Hiruzen has come to the Wind Nation now. Are you familiar with the third Hokage?" Itsuko inquired bewilderedly. Furui rubbed the child's head and laughed, saying, "Oh yes, I have traveled the world and I was friends with him in my youth. Yes, when I'm older, I want to travel the world like my grandparents." The boy shouted with joy. The young Idgrod laughs and lowers himself to his level, saying, "Well, I hope you have fun and look after yourself, little soul. I am able to take care of myself." The boy yelled and rushed towards the small wall railing and jumped, managing to get a few feet up from the ground, spinning and landing on his hands and maintaining balanced. "Gramps has been training me." The Leaf Anbu were impressed by the boy's laughter and questioned how an old man could have trained a young boy so effectively when some of their academy students would struggle with that alone. Furui said, "Careful soul, I don't want you to fall." Furui waved them off and approached the child, who was walking on his hands and balancing on the railing. Furui appeared perplexed. "I won't, Gramps." Sol grinned and moved a bit more, applying the little training the old man had given him. Furui laughs as he looks at the boy and recalls numerous incidents he's had, knowing that he's prone to mishaps. "You said that last time, yet you fell and lost half your teeth in Yugakure. So, is there anywhere you would like us to look?" Kakashi inquired. The elder Idgrod told them, bewildered, "Well, there was a fire here last week, it's rather suspicious. Apartments burned to a crisp, mother and daughter were killed, and the father moved in with a woman the very next day." "How does this relate to vampires?" Itsuko inquired. "We have been having mysterious deaths happening everywhere in this sector. We're suspicious about the circumstances that were involved, and the man who just lost his family isn't even mourning for them." The older Idgrod speaks to them and gets their approval. "All right, would you mind showing us the area where the apartment was burned so we can inspect it?" With a glance at Itsuko, Kakashi tells them, "That way we can see if there's anything that you've missed or any places that could be great for a vampire to go through. You can go and question this guy that just lost his family, see if there's any foul play." Kakashi gives her the order and receives a nod. The old Idgrod told her, "Very well, you'll find him near the mine shaft, working on something, his name is Hirogar, should be able to find him." Guards surrounded her as she walked home, saying, "Child, show them to the apartment." She then went inside the big building. With a nod, the younger Idgrod approached the two Anbu and gestured down the street, saying, "This way, I'll show you where it is." She then began to move in the direction of an unidentified spot. "I think we've got a new breed of alien here, not sure if it's friendly or not, but I'm smelling blood." The Inuzuka sniffed the air in the Fire Nation, deep in the woods, after the Anbu team had paused for a moment. He remembered all the alien species he had smelled, but it wasn't human, animal, or any other. Itachi tells them, could have been wounded by the crash. He looks around and notices some bullet marks, or attacked after it landed. He approaches the bullet hole and examines it, a little taken aback. "This isn't our type of weaponry, it's either alien or possibly a foreign design from another nation's tech. But that would be rare for anyone to have that sort of technology." Itachi tells them, and the other three prepare themselves in case they encounter difficulties. When they hear a noise in the distance, they become confused and pay close attention. After a moment, a small, ball-like object struck the tree Itachi was near, and he immediately ducked. A few more small, ball-like objects then flew past them, causing them to duck as well and draw their weapons. They glanced around quickly, but the Uchiha family saw that the small, ball-like objects weren't aimed at them, or that whoever was aiming at them was terrible at it. I think that was some misfires from someone, shooting and not knowing we're here. Shisui says in a bewildered tone, looking closely and seeing another small, ball-like object fly towards them again, knowing where they were now. This way, he says, carefully making his way towards the firing, aware that they are now close. This was really bad. I wonder what caused this, Kakashi thought as he was strolling through a burned-out apartment back in Sand City, observing several pieces of furniture that had been burned but still intact. He turned to look back and saw Idrod standing at the door. As he walked around and further into the ruined apartment, Kakashi sighed. He entered a room and immediately felt a chill run down his spine, looking around as it seemed to get colder. He stopped abruptly and was slightly taken aback when a small girl appeared close to him. He didn't move and looked closely as the girl looked at him, saying, "Hello." Her voice echoed slightly. "Who are you?" Kakashi inquired. "Who are you, Helgi?" The girl says, staring at Kakashi bewildered. "What happened?" "I'm a friend." Kakashi inquired. "The smoke woke me up, it was hot and I was scared, so I hid, then it got cold and dark, I'm not scared anymore." Helgi, the ghostly girl, tells him, "I want to play, I'm going to hide and you come and find me, you find me, I'll tell you anything you want to know, come at night though, the other one is playing and can't come until then." The girl chuckled and then disappeared. "Hold on, what else?" Kakashi shouted, unsure of what was happening. "Hey, are you okay?" Hearing Kakashi yell, Idrod inquired. After leaving the room in a state of complete confusion, Kakashi hurried to Idrod to inform her of what he had just seen. The Anbu squad returned to the Fire Nation and arrived at what appeared to be a battleground. They passed 2 dead and fully armed Turians, and Shisui remarked, "We're getting close." The ground was hidden behind the trees. One murmured, "Byakugan," before observing the action. The 2 defenders were running low on ammunition when the attackers charged, drawing closer and hitting the 2 aliens, some hitting their armor or flesh, causing them to bleed. A Krogan and a fully armed male wearing a mask were firing quickly at half a dozen aliens, one of whom was human, and they were. All of them had weapons, some of which were fastened to their wrists. "Death them. The governor is interested in the Zargo's survival." A nightstick became electrified and swung at the Krogan as one of them yelled, leapt over a boulder, and charged at them. The big Krogan grabbed the nightstick and slammed its fist into the attacker's throat, causing him to collapse as tiny electric sparks flew from the Krogan's hand. After yelling at them and throwing away the nightstick, the Krogan roared and fired his steaming shotgun a few more times, causing it to explode slightly and burn his fingers. Zargos, the alien, held onto his handgun, growing tired, and felt one of the attackers shoot and hit him in the arm. One of the attackers rolled around a tree and fired their shotgun at the Krogan, hitting him in the chest, causing him to wobble backwards but remaining upright. He continued firing until the Krogan fell to his knees, coughing up blood. While the others swiftly shot at Zargo's limbs and caused him to collapse, Zargo swiftly aimed his handgun at the assailant and fired multiple shots, swiftly eliminating him. "Targets are down." They all hurried to ensure they didn't move when one of them yelled. Unaware that the Krogan had stopped breathing for a few seconds, they all aimed their weapons at the 2. He swiftly grabbed the front of his plasma shotgun and smashed the handle into the skull of the closest one, killing him and roaring in rage. The others were startled by this, but they still aimed their weapons at him. The Krogan charged at the next closest one, but he ducked, and the other 2 fired at him. Zargos shouted and leapt to avoid the bullets, but he soon collapsed and lay on the ground, still. The attackers were a little taken aback, so they fired at the Krogan again, but the Krogan was able to launch the overheated shotgun, causing it to smash against one of the attackers and send him to the ground. The 2 remaining attackers aimed their guns at the Krogan, but they knew he was dead and turned to face Zargos. "He's still alive, we'll have to move fast," the lead attacker said, but he stopped when he felt a sharp pain in his chest. He looked down and saw a blade protruding from his chest. "What the?" he started, but the blade came out and his head flew. 2 more appeared and looked around, noticing that all the alien attackers were dead, and looked down at the last surviving alien, seeing its mask destroyed. The last attacker looked in shock and hurriedly aimed at the unknown attacker, but someone appeared near him, so he turned to shoot, but the person pushed the gun away and smashed his palm into his chest, sending him flying. "Hang on, we may have something to help you breathe," Itachi started, but the alien bit into his forearm, making him curse as the alien pierced his skin and armor, causing him to bleed rapidly. Itachi realized that the alien was breathing heavily, almost as if he couldn't, and that the mask covering his face was for breathing. Itachi hurried to him while the three had ensured the other aliens were dead. Wondering if they had saved the wrong person or if he was protecting himself, Shisui produced a gun and pointed it at the alien's head. The alien began to cough and take deep breaths, his body gradually changing shape and form. The group was shocked when he coughed even more and his head fell back. What the hell was that about? The Inuzuka inquired. The alien was young, in his mid-teens, but his skin was rougher than a dead leaf, with the occasional scar here and there. Itachi looks at his shirt and notices that it has a lot of blood on it, the alien's blood. I think he took my DNA to be able to breathe on our planet. Itachi says in a bewildered tone, noticing that the alien looked more human than he had previously, with only faint indications of his alienness showing, but people could mistake that for a blood trait. Pulling out a knife, he cut open the shirt, and to his surprise, he found several large scars, many of them fresh, but not from the fight they had just had. He checked him over again to make sure he had no serious wounds, but some didn't look good, and the Inuzuka said, looks like he's got a possible infection. He smelled it from a distance of several feet. The Hyuga says, I'll check him over. Damn, it looks like some of these haven't been looked at for a while, the Hyuga says, approaching the alien and examining him with a worried expression. We need to get him to a hospital as soon as possible, otherwise he'll be in more danger than the wounds present right now, and I can't deal with it with this limited equipment. With a firm voice, the Hyuga says. Yes, immediately. The Inuzuka responds and attempts to obtain an estimated time of arrival for the transport. Looking at Itachi's forearm and shocked that the alien had managed to bite through the battle armor, the Hyuga commands, and you may want to check on that. And we may want to get biology reports about this guy. He could be a new race that the foreign council leaders, or they failed to share that information with us. The Hyuga then begins applying medical gel to him in an attempt to stop the bleeding as best he can. Possibly. Itachi nods and notices the dead alien beside him. He recognizes the alien as a Batarian and recalls that their system had failed when a slave ship crashed on their planet, assuming that it would be a shortcut. All of their slaves were freed when they landed close to the Fire City, and while some Batarians were arrested, many others escaped and are currently involved in numerous illegal activities worldwide. He glanced at the others and saw that two more Batarians were lying close by, one with his head cut off by him and the other with his neck snapped in two by a shotgun the Krogan had thrown. He looked around some more and saw a man leaning against a tree with multiple holes in his body and wearing strange white armor that only covered his torso. He examined the man's features and found that he was almost human, but his light purple skin, large horns, and, if he were standing, he was a towering figure. Will he be all right? He looked around even more, a little taken aback by the damage that had been done before they arrived at the scene. He looked at the living alien, who looked very human-like. He was a couple of years younger than him, with messy, dirty black hair and more muscle than most people his age. He could hear the airships approaching from a distance. Itachi inquired. The Hyuga ninja responds, I think so, we'll stay here and clean up the mess. Shisui tells him, you better do what he says, Itachi. He nods. After sitting on a hospital bed for a few hours, Itachi noticed that the alien he had saved looked much better than he had just a few hours before. This was interesting. I wonder how this will play out, Itachi thought, and he relaxed a little because he had not had any free time in months. As night fell in the Sand City, Kakashi and Idgrod stood outside the city sector, close to the stone wall, and carefully examined a number of gravestones nearby. Are you certain your mother was correct? After seeing her again, Kakashi inquired, and she instructed him to check the grave site. When Idgrod senses someone approaching, he says, I believe so. My mother is hardly wrong on these kinds of subjects. Kakashi also notices this and they hide behind a dumpster. When the sun went down, the two watched intently and noticed a figure emerging from the shadows, wearing a black cloak. They watched intently until the figure stopped at a gravestone, and they were even more perplexed when the figure moved their arms, which soon caused the ground close to the gravestone to explode and a coffin to emerge from the hole. They turned around and stared at the two newcomers in disbelief as Kakashi and Idgrod hurried out of their hiding spot and came to a stop close to the individual. You're not getting her. I own her. The individual shouted, revealing herself as a woman, swiftly drew a sword, and charged at Kakashi. But then he drew his own and blocked the attack, pushed his lightning chakra into his, and sliced through the woman's chest, causing her to stumble away and her hood to fall down, revealing a black-haired woman and a vampire. Idgrod stopped, looking a little shocked, and the vampire quickly made a few hand signals and brushed their hand against the wound before Kakashi recognized a couple and swiftly swung his chakra-infused sword in her direction. Thanks, Laylat was seeking me. She was told to burn mommy and me, but she didn't want to. She wanted to play with me forever and ever. She kissed me on the neck, and I got so cold and the fire didn't even hurt. I'm tired. I'm going to go to sleep for a while now, the voice said, sounding like the little girl. The woman shot her blood-covered hand forward, and smoke exploded from it, and soon after, several bats flew forward, but the vampire was pierced through the heart, and the bats quickly fell back, exploded into smoke. Kakashi stood up straight and approached the dead vampire, removing his sword from her chest. After hearing footsteps, Kakashi turned and saw a man holding a torch. Confused, he stopped close to Idgrod and gaped at the vampire, saying, Laylat, she's dead, my wife is dead, as Idgrod put her hand on his shoulder. What, is this your spouse? Kakashi questioned him. Yes, we all believed she went rogue after leaving to join a rebellion. Laylat, poor thing, he turned back to face his wife and sobbed. He's told by Idgrod, I understand, I thought that as well. What happened? Before she left, did you notice anything strange? Well, she was hanging around Alva a lot, even though she despised her. I found it weird, especially when Hirogar moved in with her near the same time. The man continues to weep. Idgrod and the man both look surprised as Kakashi says, well, she could have been involved. However, does that imply that you believe Alva is a vampire? The man asks, startled. As he heads back into the city sector, Kakashi says, I think it's a possibility. My partner decided to investigate Hirogar's house, might have something that could prove it. Idgrod, I'll leave this area to you, I'm sure that the woman's husband would want a resting place for her. Kakashi tells her, and he quickly returns to find his partner. However, a bell is soon heard, and the other two look surprised and quickly accompany him, intending to return to the dead vampire later. After half an hour, Kakashi was inside the old Idgrod's house, standing in the grand hall and surveying the area. He was big, and there were guards nearby. Etsuko was standing next to an unconscious man, and the older Idgrod was holding a book. Kakashi and Idgrod the younger were also present. It appears that our suspicions were correct. The vampires have taken hold in one of our mine shafts and plan to take over this sector. The deaths and disappearances were caused by them and we plan on defeating them on their own ground. The senior member speaks with a voice filled with rage. I have dispatched what guards I could spare and they're on their way to clear out their lair. I've called for reinforcements and they'll be here soon hopefully. You can go on ahead to see if you can provide any assistance. She informs them. Kakashi pointed to the unconscious man and said, and what is with the man? Etsuko tells him, Hirogar attacked me and I knocked him out. Kakashi nods. The doors flew open, and a breathless man in armor, resembling a guard, hurried in. Idgrod, several civilians have rounded up and started attacking the vampire lair. They want revenge for the things the enemy have done. He screams. The old Idgrod glared at two of her guards and yelled at the Leaf Anbu, damn it. You two, get going now. They nodded and hurried out of the hallways to their destination as Idgrod yelled, you two follow as well. Valdemar, show them where. They appeared more determined than ever. Idgrod the younger questioned, what about me, mother? She looks at the unconscious man and says, you stay here, I'm not having my only daughter on the front lines. I should have known, she murmurs, beginning to consider the worst-case scenario. Standing outside a mine, the group, who were at the lowest level in the sector, saw the body of a guard who had been shot. Looks like they were either ambushed or attacked head-on while the vampires were leaving, says Etsuko. The lead guard, Valdemar, arms himself with an assault rifle and tells her, it was a slight ambush. We ran into two people in guard uniforms. They said they checked the place out and no one was in there. We called them on it and they attacked us. I pulled back to ask for reinforcements and saw the civilians coming and had to inform Idgrod. With a nod, Kakashi hurried to the mine, and the others soon followed, entering it armed and prepared for anything. Kakashi and the others accelerated their pace as they heard more gunfire coming from deep within the mine. They soon entered a sizable pit where they could see the bottom and several bodies scattered on it. Looking around, Etsuko remarks, looks like someone went to town on this place. He notices multiple deep scars in the walls, the wooden flooring, and the webs. As they descended and arrived at the bottom of the pit, they carefully examined the bodies, none of which were vampires. Kakashi pulls out his katana and says, we've got to get moving. Etsuko follows suit, seeing a tunnel and hurrying down it as he runs past a few more bodies and hears more gunshots. They knew they had more issues than they initially believed as they continued to move, smelled more blood, and saw pieces of a few skeletons. They entered a sizable area as they descended farther into the mine, where they could smell blood and rotting flesh and sensed that they were approaching something unusual. One of the guards threw out a flare, causing Kakashi and Itsuko to curse in agony and switch off their night vision. Itsuko muttered angrily, "Watch it. We had night vision on." The guard looks around the room, which is covered in both new and old bodies, and says, "Sorry, but we can't see, holy shit." He saw people he had never seen before and thought, "This isn't good, when did these people even come from?" As he sees a tunnel on the other side, Kakashi says, "Travelers, beggars, even some of their previous slaves." He then steps over a few bodies, and they quicken their pace after hearing gunfire. The group rushed and failed to notice that some of the bodies behind them had moved. Something rose from the bodies and hurried in their direction. Small sparks and blood spurted from the guard as the creature swiftly stabbed him in the neck after drawing a knife and grabbing him by the back. When the others turned to look behind them, they saw the guard being killed. Itsuko shouts, "Shit," and dashes past the final two guards. As more creatures emerged from the corpses, one of the guards exclaimed, "What the?" Valdemar threw up another flare, which struck and adhered to the ceiling, illuminating the room a little and revealing the assailants. They resembled resurrected vampires or people who had been starved to almost death because they were deathly gray and had big fangs. The guards fired their rifles at the creatures as they charged at them, taking down a few, but more sprang up and charged in their direction. They were being swiftly sliced from head to toe by Kakashi and Itsuko, but they continued to advance, their sharp nails piercing their armor but causing little harm. They were far outnumbered, Valdemar realized as he hurriedly made a few hand signals and cursed. He shouted, "Fire style, false sunlight," as the flare on the ceiling became much brighter. They accelerated their pace to kill them before attempting to flee the light as the creatures screamed in agony as the light grew brighter and their bodies began to smoke. Inquiring as to whether the others had passed through this route or not, Kakashi chopped off the head of one of the creatures. As Kakashi swiftly swung his sword around and cut through one of the attackers' chests, he asked Valdemar what was with the light. He smashed the back of his rifle into an assailant's head and retaliated, saying, "I fought against these bastards for years. I use the jutsu when there's a fire around and it hurts the vampires. The bigger the fire, the brighter it'll be," he screamed. "You better have a fire-style jutsu." While Kakashi tackled the two guards, Itsuko turned around with her katana and nodded. Itsuko shouted, "Wind style, protective spinning vortex," as the sword spun like a tiny tornado. Kakashi made a few hand gestures in a hurry. "Fireball jutsu, fire style." When Kakashi says this to himself, the screen on his helmet rises, and he lets out a quick breath, causing a huge fireball to shoot upward and cover the roof as it grew larger due to the wind. With a few quick hand signals, Valdemar caused the flames to brighten significantly, turning everything white and causing a number of agonized screams of horror and agony. The light went out after a few seconds, and the group had to wait a minute before they could see again. When they did, they saw that many places were on fire and that some bodies had been completely burned. "Nice work, man," Itsuko remarks as he surveys the area, which is covered in ashes. With a bewildered, "Thanks," Valdemar stands up, panting, and receives a nod from the other guard. "We'll have to move, I don't know if the others are going to be alright," he replies. Kakashi nods at the dead guard and says, "All right, let's move and I'm sorry for your comrade." When the guard said, "It's okay, he died in honor," the group hurried to the other end, and by the time they reached the tunnel, the gunfire had gotten even louder. A voice exclaimed, "You will never wipe us out." The group soon arrived at a larger tunnel with multiple individuals remaining undercover, some dressed normally and others acting as guards. While the others observed the new arrivals, Valdemar proceeded to stop close to one of the guards. However, a number of gunshots soon emanated from the tunnel. Over the noise, Valdemar exclaimed, "What's the situation?" After looking, the guard recognized the person. As the guard waited, he saw one of the guards glance around the corner and get his head blasted off. "We're pinned down here. We tried to push through, but we lost 2 men last time. The civilians aren't going, but I'd rather have them here. Some extra firepower and cover is always better than none," he countered. He screamed, "Shit." One of the other guards shouted, hiding behind a boulder, "We should pull back." Another voice shouted, "No. We may be pinned down." But they're in the same situation as we are. Kakashi turned to see a regular guy in regular armor, indicating that he wasn't a guard. If we pull back, they'll be able to make a stronger foothold than us. Looking to the side, Kakashi sees a path to a higher level with some other people on it, hiding behind the railing. He's right, if they manage to guard at the place before, we won't be able to advance at all. Where does that lead? Kakashi inquired, observing it heading in the direction of their destination. Leads to another tunnel, it heads into the room and I believe it'll lead to a different route in there. The initial security officer responds, we sent a few people down there, but we're not sure if they made it or if they're dead. Kakashi glanced at the path and hurried past the guard to the corner. He grabbed a small mirror from his forearm and pushed it around the corner to get a better look. He could only make out half a dozen people because it was so dark, but he knew there were more concealing. When he saw a stone table in the center of the long tunnel with a person eating and observing the scene, he became confused. Kakashi tells them, looks like I found the leader. However, the mirror quickly flew from his grasp and struck the wall. And they've got a sniper. Etsuko said, why don't we use that false light jutsu thing? Placing his handgun on his side, the armored man tells them, can't, they've got a water-style user in there, removes all flames before it gets too near. He then moves away from the corner and begins to make his way towards the path to the higher levels. Kakashi turned to face them after noticing a battle axe resting on his back. I'm going to go through the other path to see if it does lead to another path. If we do, then we can cause confusion and force them back and take a few of them out. He gestures to the others. Any volunteers to come with me? With 2 guards and a regular civilian joining, Kakashi declares, I'll come. Valdemar was about to follow, but he decided he must remain and maintain order in this area. Kakashi asked, Etsuko, stay here and make sure they don't try and advance, okay? And she nodded. After saying, let's go then. The man rushes up the path, passing guards who are tending to their injuries and attempting to aim at any assailants. Kakashi and the others swiftly followed, covering the civilian as they swiftly turned the corner from the large cavern. Get ready to move, he yells as he runs, and soon after, a few bullets strike his armor, leaving tiny dents that almost pierce through it. Numerous bullets were hitting them, denting their armor, and one guard screamed in agony as a bullet passed through his leg and caused him to collapse. As soon as they moved, Kakashi seized the guard's arm and swiftly pulled him along. They soon arrived at another tunnel and dashed through it. After a few seconds, the wounded guard and the small group were gasping for air. They heard gunfire and turned to see a couple of people hiding behind a small barricade. Kakashi noticed that there was a guard and a civilian in a small, tastefully decorated room, that is, until the fighting began. Seeing that there were some people shooting at the other end of the tunnel, Kakashi swiftly seized the injured guard's rifle and made his way to the chamber where the vampires are kept. He noticed that the civilian was a little agitated when he stopped close to him. Kakashi recognized him and looked, perplexed. Kakashi questioned, aren't you the man from the graveyard? The man yelled, yeah, I'm looking for revenge for what they did to my wife. As he passed Kakashi and clung to his pistol, firing around the corner. He soon gave a pained scream and remained behind the corner as bullets struck the wall and a small barricade. When he saw his group preparing to attack, Kakashi turned to shoot. The enemy began firing at them after he received angry cries. Keeping the rifle in his left hand, Kakashi opened his left eye, his Sharingan opened beneath his two-way screen, and everything was getting slower and clearer. As he hurried around the corner, he planted his foot on the barricade and leapt far. He saw 5 enemies standing their ground and began shooting with his rifle. The bullets were flying in their direction, and because Kakashi was able to dodge them and hit the enemy with his shots, the enemy was missing their shots. One bullet struck one in the head, causing their brains and blood to spray onto the wall behind her, while others struck them in the chest and fell back. The bullet stopped firing, the clip was empty, and Kakashi landed easily on the ground. Knowing that 2 of the enemy were vampires, he looked around and saw that they were still standing. He scanned the area quickly and discovered that it was a sleeping chamber. 2 more enemies then emerged from a concealed location and charged at Kakashi brandishing small blades. Kakashi swiftly engaged the other attacker after slamming the rifles back into one of the melee attackers, sending him reeling back. He swiftly stabbed him with the rifle's front end, managed to stab a tiny bit into his chest, and caused him to stagger back. Kakashi then spun around and smashed his foot into the other end, causing the rifle to stab through them. After coughing up blood, the man collapsed to the ground and passed away. The first assailant made a hasty attempt to get back up, but Kakashi stabbed him in the back with a kunai, causing him to fall to the ground and remain there. When Kakashi noticed that the injured enemies were moving, he grabbed one of the melee attacker's small blades and threw it at them, striking one in the back before it fell to the ground as the other tried to flee. Kakashi shouted, "It's clear. Move it," and hurried after the injured man. Although they did divert their attention, the guards and civilians hurried down the tunnel, shocked to see how quickly Kakashi killed them. Moving swiftly, they soon witnessed Kakashi collide with the final adversary, driving his sword through the heart and into the victim's back. After using the sword to pin the victim to the wall, Kakashi turned to his left and noticed two individuals clutching a big chest. One was dressed in a guard uniform, while the other had multiple bite marks on his body and appeared sickly. Seeing that the vampire he had attacked was still holding his gun, Kakashi swore, grabbed it, pointed it at them, and fired. The sickly man was swiftly killed by this, and the guard who had been turned dropped his chest and fled into the cavern. Kakashi swiftly took his blade away and hurried to where the guard was going. With their weapons ready, the others quickly caught up and began to move quickly. With two of the enemies still concentrating on the main entrance, Kakashi continued to follow and made his way into the cavern's back area. He promptly killed the two and noticed that the guard he was pursuing was frightening everyone. Kakashi swiftly ducked behind a stone pillar and only avoided the bullets as they aimed their weapons at him and fired. Kakashi glanced over and saw the man at the head of the table hastily leaving with others as the group he was with began firing, creating a great deal of confusion. Kakashi dashed around the pillar and charged at the group, but someone leapt on the table and made a few quick hand signals. The person shouted, "Water style, water bomb," and spat out a tiny ball of water, which hit the ground and exploded, leaving a tiny crater. The person kept spitting water at everyone. The guards began to charge and shoot at the water user, but the user swiftly created a wall of water and stopped the shots. When Kakashi noticed this, he made a few quick hand gestures and rushed forward, stabbing through the water wall with his rapidly glowing, electrical hand. He shouted, "Chidori," and the water quickly disappeared, to be replaced by blood as the victim fell from the table with a hole in their chest. One of the guards shouts, "They're making a run for it," as he fires at the escaping vampires and their slaves. When Kakashi saw their leader, he inhaled deeply and concentrated his chakra in his hand. Suddenly, lightning emerged from his hand, transformed into a dog-like creature, and bounded forward. The lightning beast struck the ground close to them and exploded, shocking the leader and a few of his followers into stopping. Around them, smoke gathered and then dissipated, revealing a few charred bodies and the leader screaming in agony as his supporters pulled him away. As the guards and civilians pursued the vampires in an attempt to swiftly eradicate them, Itsuko rushed to Kakashi's aid as he collapsed to his knees in exhaustion. Knowing that the jutsu he used was experimental and resulted in a great deal of chakra exhaustion, Kakashi slowly stood back up. As he helps him up, Itsuko shouts, "Come on Kakashi, we've got to eliminate the enemy before they manage to regroup." Okay, Kakashi takes a deep breath and begins to follow slowly. After a minute, the two soon discovered the group exhausted and were told that the enemy had a way out of the mine from a shadowy corner leading to the front entrance. After a few minutes, they made their way swiftly to the tunnel's exit, soon arrived at the surface, and all came to a halt in mild surprise and shock. The vampires and their servants were still kneeling on the ground with their weapons on the ground and their hands behind their heads, and a small group of shinobi, DRD, and guards stood there, aiming their weapons at them. A voice said, "You did well, Leaf Anbu, men, my fellow people." The Kazekage emerged from the crowd. He gives the order, "Men, search through the caves, we need to know if they're all gone, move." And a number of ninjas rush in response. As Itsuko assisted him in standing, Kakashi gasped and appeared perplexed. Kakashi questioned, "Why are you acting now?" The Kazekage tells them and glares at the vampires, saying, "I couldn't react on false information, it could have risked having other vampires and enemies move more freely." He nods to the guards and shinobi, who then seize and drag the enemy away as punishment. "And I see that you managed to get their leader, Movarth, I believe his name is, he's got a large bounty on his head." Two individuals approached the mushroom chakra tower in the shadows and leapt onto the main walkway that led into and out of the structure. They remained vigilant after noticing the small number of guards in the area, either because they were lucky or because they thought an ambush might be approaching. 3 armed guards with guns rushed up to the two as they approached the entrance of the tall, electrical building. The commander shouted, "Freeze! You're not allowed to be here. which caused the two individuals to exchange glances before turning back to face each other. One of the other guards shouted, "We are the Wind Nation's top guards. We order you to identify yourselves." The two stooped a little, and the biggest one reached back and picked up something. The commander started to shout, "Don't move," but the two disappeared and he was hit in the chest, causing it to tear and be flung back. A few feet behind the three guards, the other two guards responded with a gargled response, their throats sliced open. The two individuals were now in the light. The tallest one smirked and laid his bandaged sword on his back, saying, "Now then, that was easy, I was at least expecting a few shots." The other person, who reveals herself as a woman, says, "Don't get overconfident, Kisame, we're here for a mission from our leader and I don't plan on failing." She looks up to see lightning strike the tower's roof, but it doesn't cause any damage, just electric waves. Knowing that any significant damage up there could cause the entire place to collapse, Kisame tells her, "I know that, I just want a little more fun." He also looks up. The woman puts two knives away and starts to head for the main entrance, telling him, "We've got to move fast. Their forces will most likely come soon and we've got to get out of here before that happens, but I know that we aren't going to get out of this without a fight, so be ready." Kisame grinned and started to walk with her, saying, "Then at least we'll have some fun. Don't go on ahead, Satomi, you may run into something you don't want to handle." Kisame laughed. When he pushed the doors open, the woman known as Satomi told him, "We don't have time for this, just get moving." When he looked inside, he saw nothing but darkness, but as soon as they entered, a few tiny lights turned on. Motion sensors. Kisame said, "Yeah, what is this place?" Having never seen a building like it, all she could see were white walls, a few doors, and numerous hallways. As they approached a desk, Satomi tells him, "From the information we received, it's what powers the sand wall. I also hear that they teach high-level jutsu and mysterious items." Their footsteps reverberated through the hallways, and they halted when they heard footsteps coming from other hallways. She announces, "We've got company." Suddenly, she feels movement coming from the desk, and she feels a lot of electricity running through her body. She looks to see a security guard at the desk with a taser gun and a wire attached to her. As Satomi pointed her hand at the security guard, a knife with a wire attached sprang out of her sleeve and stabbed the man in the arm. Kisame saw this and laughed. The security guard dropped the gun and screamed in agony as his body trembled from the electricity. A few seconds later, the electricity surge ceased, smoke erupted from the two, and the security guard fell to the ground. "Are you all right?" Kisame inquired, but then his right arm began to sting. He turned to see a wire fastened to his forearm and turned to face a hallway where a woman in robes and two security guards were standing. Kisame laughed and grabbed the wire, pulling hard, sending the security guard flying in his direction. He then smashed his fist into the person's face, sending him flying. Now it's getting interesting. The woman and the final security guard ducked as the individual flew past them, appearing a little taken aback. According to the woman, "Who are you?" With a sly smile, Kisame reached for the handle of his sword. Kisame tells her, "It doesn't matter, you're going to die soon anyway." However, he turned to see that Satomi had taken hold of his arm. With her muscles twitching slightly from having pins and needles all over her body, she tells him, "We've got to move fast, so do it quickly." She then starts to leave, moving deeper into the building. "All right then." Kisame grinned and turned to face the two, but the guard's taser gun made him grin once more. As the guard fired and struck his bicep, causing his muscles to spasm, he grinned and said, "I thought you would have learned." As the woman in the robes made a few hand signals and tiny sparks emerged from her hands, Kisame laughed and glanced at the two, but she became perplexed and grabbed the wire. "Lightning style. High voltage touch." She screamed, causing a lot of electricity to flow through the wire and sending Kisame flying backwards as a tiny explosion occurred, filling the air with smoke. Satomi halted and turned to face Kisame, but she was unable to see him due to the smoke. She signed and continued to walk while the two hurried down the hallway. Kisame shouted, "Big mistake. Water style. Water cannonball." The smoke abruptly disappeared, and a huge ball of water headed directly at the two, causing a tiny explosion before quickly covering the floor with water. Kisame emerged from the hallway, looking a little irritated as he approached Satomi. Satomi continued to walk, reached the back, and pressed a button on the wall while waiting. Unaware that the silent alarm had been activated, Kisame utters in frustration, "That was a bitter disappointment, one hit and they're down." A young boy with red hair sat on the building's ledge near the top of the city roofs, staring at his hard, sand-spinning palm with a dejected expression. With tears in his eyes, he uttered the words, "Why does no one want me? What am I?" The boy immediately stepped back from the ledge and attempted to hide when he noticed movement to his right and turned to see a group of shinobi hurrying around, fully equipped. As the team hurried past the boy, one paused to give him a quick glance, and the others hurried off, appearing more urgent than normal. Fearfully, the shinobi yells, "You should go back home. We've got a state of emergency, wait. Lord Gaara, I'm sorry," and dashes to catch up to his teammates. "What?" the boy named Gaara said, perplexed by what had transpired but saddened and incensed at the man's fear, which had already been expressed after only a brief encounter. He approached the edge and turned to see the shinobi hurrying in that direction. He was perplexed to see that people were running both to and from the mushroom tower. "What's happening?" Gaara pondered. After a little while, the two attackers of the mushroom tower were in an elevator, silently waiting as it slowly made its way to the top floor while they listened to the elevator music. Kisame remarks, "This is getting duller by the second." He looks around the small space they are in, but finds nothing noteworthy. When the elevator doors opened, a pitch-black room was visible. Satomi and Kisame peered closely and noticed movement in the shadows. After exchanging glances, Kisame and Satomi left the elevator. Kisame grinned and reached behind his back before moving forward while Satomi followed him. Kisame laughed when he heard metal footsteps and 3DRD bots emerge from the shadows. Kisame laughed and said, "Only 3. I would have thought they'd have more protection." Blades shot from the wrists of the 3DRD bots, who stood ready and charged at them while making hand signals. He quickly inhaled deeply, and his cheeks swelled. Kisame launched a huge water ball at the DRD bots as they leapt in his direction, sending them all flying and causing metal crashes. Satomi says in a serious tone, "Nice shot, Kisame. We're in the middle of a tower that gets hit by lightning and you're shooting water everywhere." With a, "Fine then, you deal with them." Kisame follows her. Seeing the 3DRD get back up and charge at them, Satomi sighs and moves forward, making a few quick hand signals. She spat up a liquid-like substance that resembled dirt and slammed it into the front DRD. It stopped instantly and started to try to remove the substance, but it started to slow down and make a creaking noise. Since the liquid material had solidified, the DRD could not be moved. The second DRD threw its bladed hand at her, but she ducked it and punched her fist into the DRD's chest, piercing it and tearing something out in the process, causing the DRD to shut down and fall to the ground. A ripped Akatsuki shirt, some sparks emanating from her back, and a tiny bit of blood on the blade were all left behind when the final DRD charged and succeeded in getting behind Satomi. She made a few quick hand signals and spun around, spraying the DRD with the liquid dirt substance. As it attempted to move, it got harder and harder until it was too difficult. As Kisame looks at her work, Satomi says, "Done, now let's get this thing before we run into any more distractions." She then swiftly moves down the hall. A few minutes later, the two arrived at a metal door and felt a lot of chakra emanating from it, but they knew it wasn't from a human. After a few seconds, Satomi noticed and inspected fingerprints on the number pad. She exhaled, causing a dusty substance to come out of her mouth and cover the pad. After a few seconds, she began quickly pressing the buttons in an attempt to decipher the code, and eventually the doors opened. When they entered, they ignored the overwhelming chakra feeling and saw a pitch-black room with multiple wires hanging from the ceiling and connected to something in the shadows. Kisame looks around and remarks, "This place seems weird." She notices some furniture that would be found in any home. Someone shouted, "Hi there," and they turned to watch the wires move and an 8-year-old girl emerge from the shadows. Her eyes were the same shade of orange as her short, spiky, mint green hair, which she accessorized with an orange clip. She was wearing a lot of loose clothing that looked ragged, and she had wires attached to her, most of which were on her back but also on her limbs and the back of her head. Bending slightly, Kisame said, "Hey there, now who are you?" The girl smiled and walked over to them, saying, "I'm Fu." Fu said, "Who are you?" Kisame grins toothily and says, "Well, I'm Kisame Hoshigaki, and this is my partner, Satomi Nendo." As he looks around and notices electrical pulses passing through the wires, Satomi informs him, "This is our target." "Target?" Fu questioned bewilderedly. Kisame looks around before turning back to face Fu. "So you're the seven-tailed Jinchuriki. Didn't think they'd leave you unprotected like this," he says. Knowing about Tailed Beast, Fu responds, "Yeah, The people who look after me say that I help protect the city, since the demon in me helps power the sand. Kisame was about to knock the girl out when Satomi grabbed his shoulder and turned to face him. Kisame and Satomi exchanged glances. Fu gave her a curious look as she asked, "Would you like to come with us?" Fu inquired, "Where are you going?" The girl smiled enthusiastically when Satomi said, "We're going to take a short trip through the city and leave the country. Would you like to see the world?" Fu exclaimed excitedly, "Yeah, I've always wanted to see outside this tower." With a small laugh, Kisame snatched up his bandaged blade and grinned. As Kisame cuts through the wires, red chakra and electrical sparks emerge, and his sword begins to make noises in excitement. He says, "Okay then, don't move, girl." The girl was very disoriented and in pain. Eventually, an alarm was triggered and multiple red lights appeared, frightening her as parts of the wall moved. The two Akatsuki members watched as dozens of DRD units emerged from the wall and landed near the floor's edge. As more DRD units emerge from the wall, Satomi remarks, "This could be problematic." Kisame holds his blade, shark skin, and declares, "Now this is my kind of thing." Satomi picks up Fu and says, "We don't have time for this, we still have this girl and we have to leave soon." However, she suddenly feels uneasy. When they heard a metallic noise from above, they turned to see a big, red object emerge from the roof. It soon fell, and the two Akatsuki hurried to avoid the impact as it smashed into the ground and set off a tiny explosion. After it cleared, a 12-foot robot with 4 claw-like legs pierced the ground stood there. Its red, smooth body was nothing more than a body with legs and a white light on the front, and it was as sturdy as a tank. "Well, this is bad, an ATD, anti-tank droid, even you'll have trouble with that," she responds. After glancing at the two, the ATD soon had 3 white orbs hovering around it. When one of the orbs halted at its front and fired, Kisame jumped and cried, "We've got to move." Kisame swiftly performed a hand sign and sprayed a lot of water at the ATD and struck after it crashed into the area and vaporized it with a few DRD that were nearby. This only resulted in a minor dent. The wall that the ATD struck was now gone, exposing a hallway, metal components, and circuits. Satomi hurled Fu into the air, cursed, and made a few quick hand signals as the ATD began to power up after another orb appeared in front of it. A tiny explosion was swiftly caused when he inhaled and spat up a lot of thick, filthy water, which struck the orb and a portion of the ATD body. Satomi leapt back to catch Fu as she was flung through the air, but he missed a few DRD units charging. Kisame was able to block their path and slammed his blade against them. The DRD units began charging towards them as soon as Satomi caught Fu, who was now terrified. The smoke cleared, and the ATD soon had its orbs in front of it. It had some solid, dirt-like substance on its armor, but the damage was minor and covered in dirt. Kisame smirked darkly as he stood in front of Satomi, eager to engage the small army of droid units, but he soon noticed the ATD getting ready to attack. As it headed toward Kisame, Satomi, and Fu, the ball sped forward and soon changed into a few slash-like blows. The DRD units moved swiftly to dodge the attack. The slashes went straight through the wall, causing multiple violent electrical surges as the two adults swiftly escaped the attack. One of the surges struck Kisame's back, causing him to curse in agony. Kisame shouted, "Let's move," and seized Satomi, who was still holding Fu, before rushing in the direction of the big hole the ATD had previously used. Kisame soon allowed Satomi to run alone after the DRD force charged after them with the intention of eliminating the two Akatsuki members, but she soon encountered opposition from other guards and DRD units. Satomi shouted, "We're going to have to make a shortcut," and began slicing through the wall with her blade out while clutching the terrified Fu in her other hand. Because of this, a lot of electricity was leaking out. Kisame sighed and slashed his sword through the wall. The city was visible outside, dark from the abrupt change in power, as the wall collapsed and a lot of wind came from the hole. Their hair stood up due to the electrical currents as lightning struck the wall and caused sparks to fly everywhere. Kisame shouted, "Let's go," and jumped out of the hole. As Satomi glanced down the corridors, she noticed the DRD units rushing in their direction. Satomi commanded, "Fu, hold on and don't let go," and jumped out of the hole, making Fu cling firmly to her. The two Akatsuki members glide through the desolate area of the city surrounding the Mushroom Tower, evading the few DRD units that leapt out to try and capture them. As the other DRD units in the tower watched, the DRD units fell to the ground. Although Kisame and Satomi were able to stay in the air thanks to the wings that shot out of their backs, they were aware that they would hit the ground hard as soon as the city discovered they were there. Kisame inquired, "Where is our escape route?" Satomi looks at the walls as a lot of sand falls from the swirling wall, but it tries to stay active. "We're aiming for the Land of Rain's transport vessel outside the sand wall, but seeing it now, I'm guessing it'll be easy." As the sand's guards noticed them, Kisame covered his face and said, "Sounds easy enough." Bullets were striking him. A huge monorail was just departing to the boundaries of the Rain Village. Two enormous wires were fastened to the walls outside the city and pointed out to the desert. As the shinobi and people were leaving, they were waving to their loved ones when they heard shouting coming from behind them. They turned to see a few people being flung into the air. They watched in disbelief as two individuals in Akatsuki cloaks burst through, leapt as high as they could, and landed on the monorail. Kisame laughed and had to quickly duck from gunfire. "Good timing. Let's get in," Satomi exclaims urgently as she clings to the young girl and embraces her. Kisame laughs, steps to the rear, lands on a walkway, and opens a door close to him. Kisame laughs and says, "Come on, ladies first." She then quickly enters. A number of passengers on the monorail gazed at them in disbelief as the two stood there, the girl still terrified. A whisper from Fu says, "I'm scared." Kisame shouts, "No one move. And no one gets hurt. Unless you're a guard or shinobi." As he notices a few individuals standing with weapons. Kisame laughs and reaches for the hilt of his sword, saying, "Thought so." Nearing morning, the cage sat at his desk with a disapproving expression on his face after learning that two senior rogue ninja had successfully captured their seven-tailed Jinchuriki. They would now need to attempt to retake her, and since he was not going to use his son for that, alternative energy would have to be used. Sitting in the same room, the Hokage expressed concern for the safety of the cage's city but promised to assist in any way possible if they were unable to recover the Jinchuriki. A female sand Anbu bowed as she entered the room. With an irritated glare from him, she told him, "Lord Cage, we just received word from our scouts. The monorail system to the Rain Nation has collapsed. Several bodies were found, but Fu was not found in the wreckage." The cage inquired, "What did you find then?" He looked shocked as the Anbu told him, "Civilians, both alive and dead, are ninja and guards, but we also found a few bodies of waterfall shinobi, also finding one of the attackers of the Mushroom Tower gravely wounded." The cage exclaimed, "Does that mean the Waterfall Nation has our Jinchuriki?" Sarutobi says, "Now let's not jump to conclusions," and gets to his feet. The Anbu remains bowed and says, "My lord, I don't know, the invader wouldn't say anything, but we aim to get the information as best as possible." The cage exclaims, "Very well then." The Anbu disappears in a puff of smoke. Sarutobi inquired, "So what do you plan on doing with those new prisoners?" Informing him, the cage sat down and gazed out the window at the sun. "The vampires will be thrown into the desert and they will be gunned down should they try to re-enter the city. They will have a chance of survival if they move fast, but so far, no one has. And as for the charmed people, they will be placed in the rehabilitation prison." He pondered, "I wonder where she is." A big man had just ascended a precipitous cliff at the Wind Nation's border. He stood up and gripped his arm, which was covered in a ripped black cloak with red clouds. He glared at the sands as he coughed violently and started to move. Then he turns to leave, saying, "I hate the desert, I'm never going there again." He started to enter the Rain Nation, thinking, "It's unbelievable that those waterfall ninja ambushed us and took that Jinchuriki. I'm sorry I lost Satomi." When he saw a man with orange hair, wearing the same cloak as him, with purple eyes and face piercings, he stopped. As the weather appeared to darken, Kisame walked past him with a sly smile.
So this was it for this series. I hope you enjoyed it. To watch more series like this, subscribe to my channel. Till then, we weep offline.